I'm with you. I think that's good.
Do we really want to do the state symbols?
I think if we leave it like that, they can choose how many they want. You know, a district can choose how many they want.
So I don't want to memorize the whole list.
No.
What's interesting in fourth grade when my kids were going through it, you know, we were new to the state, so I didn't know them, so we all had to learn them together. It was neat though to have the discussion of why.
Yeah.
Why this, why that? You know, I remember my daughter saying, "Oh, you want a mule? Why did you want a mule breed?" I said, "You have to understand, the mule was the locomotive, the car, the truck of the West. It was incredibly important." And she said, "Oh, okay." And it really helped that conversation. So I think it can be a rich conversation, more than just a memory matching game. Especially if you go for the significance. And some of them, I think people will say, well, that's not very significant. Why would they choose to paddle fish, for instance? Except that maybe it's really unique to the waters of that area.
Who goes up there and makes a case for me.
Right. I think that's what it is.
There was a group in our church that went up here as part of this years ago, and they came up here, and that was their big victory, is they got the paddlefish named.
Oh, okay.
A group that
So
gets
it was your
together.
group that's responsible.
It wasn't, I mean,
That's all right.
but I give you that, they were with like 4-H group.
Sure.
And they come up here. So, some of that's just to get some things in the office to be,
So do we want to, because I know sometimes they put things in parentheses, like ID, for example, maybe we need to do it that way instead of, because it does kind of say of the following symbols, and so there's a lot of official state symbols. Because all of those are official state symbols, right?
You could even say of the following of Missouri symbols such as.
Of Missouri, yeah, such as, yeah, that's probably.
Then if you're
Of the following.
Like that, or let's.
Could it be in other official state symbols? Or
Et cetera.
et cetera,
Et cetera.
You need to add following after the top.
Where?
Recognize and explain the significance of the following Missouri. Oh, no, not for doing such a.
Right.
Maybe we don't need the then something's not right grammatically there. Recognize and explain.
Of Missouri symbols.
Such
Got it.
as.
You're right.
You get the login page.
Yeah, well, no, it's not coming up to login page, that's the problem. It shows that it opens it up here, but then you have to continue.
so is there
I have to open up a different browser
Kansas City, is it found?
to find.
Yeah, what would be a symbol of Kansas City?
It's the city of mountains.
The fountains?
I mean, everything's sort of mountains.
Riverboats, I think, not Kansas City, just
Casinos.
barbecue, yes?
So I don't mind that being such as, because even then, like if Greg, if there's something specific to Springfield, we don't have anything else in here about even more local regions where you could use. That's what I was kind of thinking of that. That would give you some autonomy in picking some of your symbols too.
Right.
I think that would be an interesting place for reporters to come to regions.
On here,
Yeah.
under second grade.
And I think they're visible.
Well, I mean, we just added a such as.
Flag.
Recognize and explain the significance of Missouri and other states' symbols. We do that, you know, to get that idea of commerce.
That would be second grade, is what you're saying,
No, third.
I'd prefer to keep third, just focused on Missouri myself.
Well, when did we do away with other states?
Supposed to be
So we can do a fourth, fifth, or two. Fourth and fifth are about the United States again, broadly.
Okay, we good with third grade? Fourth grade, rather? No, it's third grade, sorry.
Right?
Second grade, importance of the Pledge of Allegiance. Anything else we need to add to second grade? Somebody mentioned yesterday the bald eagle. I wrote it down because someone mentioned it, but what other symbols are we thinking
Talk
about?
about the White House too a little bit.
Right,
Liberty Bells when it's off in 5.
right. So is that first grade or is that?
but we have it written over here, American songs and symbols,
On where?
first grade.
First grade.
Does it go all the way to Mount Rushmore?
Though that might fit nicely in the regions, kind of the grade 2 landmark, you know, if we did national landmarks of different regions, so like Mount Rushmore, I think, maybe you can do just Washington Monument.
Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, so you get the Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln memorials.
Go out west, you would have
Las Vegas.
National symbol? National.
Well, that's the same as first.
Right,
Yes,
so what-
recognize and explain the significance.
So we want to do landmarks, we want to do national symbols.
That might be a
Monuments.
landmarks might be a nice pairing with regions.
That's what I was thinking, landmarks and
Right.
monuments or something like that. Okay, like I said, Mount Rushmore, Stone Mountain.
Do we want to do, recognize and explain the significance of regional? Do we want to just do national landmarks, because it would be regional?
They are regional
If
already.
we-
What else are we putting on there?
Stone Mountain.
National.
Alamo.
I was trying to think how you could kind of do the idea of memorials, but, you know, it's like, I don't think we do all of Washington DC, but how,
I'm just trying to think of like different regions in the United States where there's some different landmarks.
the gateway, I mean, the
One
Portland,
landmark.
Gate Bridge.
When you see the Seattle
Spacing.
space,
Spacing.
that, I automatically, okay, that's.
Yeah.
Does it speak to the
But-
principles of the Republic?
Yeah.
See, the nice thing about Mount Rushmore and the Alamo, they do.
Right.
But I would say, though, I guess there's a gateway, I mean, that's because it's specific to Missouri, so you keep that as a Missouri, maybe not a national symbol, maybe you would.
What other ones out features,
Yeah.
I see how these got Grand Canyon, it doesn't have anything to do with the.
Yeah, it's just,
But their national landmarks are all together. Wouldn't it be national? Or national park, I mean.
So you get into this kind of like Yellowstone.
Just don't have historical, like, they just all.
Right.
Pikes Peak. No, I'm stretching, I'm thinking.
Raise.
Yeah.
It's really quite petition the government that we get the national park something.
Yeah.
We continue.
What about out east? Concord, Bridge of Concord. Something's not.
With first grade, did we want to have the White House or the Liberty Bell?
I think so.
Yeah,
I really do, yeah.
So would that go with first grade or second grade? I'm not sure what the
I
decision
said
is.
the first grade.
National, so.
The other thing that would be nice in second grade, or first grade, would be something in your community. Almost every community has some sort of, war memorial, or founders memorial, or,
Yeah, we already, we have, the down 60, 80 something people that, where our school is, and we have a veterans memorial there in that town.
Liberty Bell.
Missouri is our Arrow Rock, Christchurch, Field House, Florida Stage, the Gateway Arch, something.
How about the Statue of Liberty?
It's already up there.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Missouri's are what?
Arrow Rock, Christchurch, Cathedral, Field House, Florida Stage, the Gateway Arch, and the Memorial. So the Liberty Memorial, we can't see.
Right. I'm not Minnesota.
So, those are the most recent. Oh, the Anheuser-Busch Brewery is designated as a.
That's a great field trip. With second graders.
Or the teachers.
Barbarians.
Yeah.
Station Eve, the Truman Library. Mark Twain's Living Home.
Oh, yeah, like grants.
Oh, yeah.
Laura Ingalls Wilder, Laura Ingalls Wilder. Yeah, that's just something they did. Native
was her show.
I was thinking, even like when I was in Illinois, about going to Missouri, what were the things you would think about going to see? Because that's the thing, grow up in Missouri, would it be the arch, would it have been animal? For some reason, I would think of caves.
They designated by national parks, national monuments, national historic sites, national historic parks, national memorials, and national battlefields. Those are the. Wow.
It's a lot.
For grade one, what do you guys think about something about symbols in your community? Yes or no?
I would be fine with that. I think it's important to know the symbols in your community. The Hubble telescope in Nashville.
Probably the U.S. Capitol, just as a.
US
I think
Capitol,
I
yeah.
think we switched that somewhere else.
Now, you're saying first, because we kind of have a second over there.
Well, second is all the kind of
It's the
regional
AL.
stuff. So different places around the country. So first is school, community. But also some similar songs about those parents songs.
It's always,
I knew that one of them changed.
I really do think the White House and the US Capitol and the Supreme Court are really developmentally, just because they're all buildings, and I really think that's, if you're wanting them to recognize and explain, if you're looking at those three buildings and say, this is this, and this is this, and this is this, and it's not that I don't think it's possible for first grade, but I think if you were to take them all, able to take them all there and concretely look at those three buildings, and I don't know, those I worry a little bit about, just.
I think kids know the White House.
Yes, yes.
I don't, like my first grade, there's a bank near our, there's a bank that's right off of one of the streets that just kind of almost resembles the White House.
Yeah, they call it-
They call it the White House.
Yeah.
Even how they know it, they call it the White House. So somewhere along the way, they at least get that. I don't know if they.
The Capitol is more recognizable than the White House.
There's certainly a lot of legislation about the Capitol and the White House.
I think this is a court review.
That's the tough one, yeah.
I was just wondering what it.
The base reliefs across the top, which are pretty interesting, all the lawgivers across time, including an image of Muhammad.
A picture of 9 old people.
That's inside.
So, we're just trying to come up with more, deciding what's around.
I don't think we need any more.
Any more?
No.
Okay.
I think Kathy's saying maybe we should move the White House Capitol and Supreme Court to another grade level. And then
Or keep one for them to kind of hold. I think I would probably, if we were gonna keep one, I'd argue for the White House.
Where do you
I
do the
think
branches
that's
of government? Where's the branches of government? Because
It
that's.
used to be third grade.
Yeah, so it was current in third grade, we kind of started looking at them.
Right. We don't know yet, because we're not on that.
Because we moved.
We're the dead government.
State government to third probably, so probably fourth.
Here's the 3 branches of government, the federal government. In 4th grade, we state.
So we'll go shift down. Go
Down
center
or flip
government.
flop.
Do they flip-flop? Or do we need to cover federal before we cover state?
States came first.
That's kind of what we've been doing.
They could be the federal.
It seems kind of late to be introducing the White House in 4th grade.
So do you want to nix the Supreme Court? Or
I would prefer to have all
Are you
three
advocating?
you
keep
prefer to
all?
have all 3?
together. Because it also reinforces the separation of powers.
So given us an assessment document, because the verbs are recognize and explain. So I'm gonna have to name that and say, this is the purpose as a first grader. So how would that look?
That's why I think it has to be in alignment with when we use the branches of government. Wherever we place those 3 symbols, if we have those as symbols, it needs to be at the same grade level as when they learn about the 3 branches of government, because then it becomes an automatic given.
Okay, so that's possibly new.
Right.
In 2nd grade, you see the White House, this is the president, the executive branch.
Right.
Just the Capitol, and this is where we make all the legislative branch.
Right. It becomes really kind of automatic. I know, I got one there yesterday too, that's why I came down in here.
Yeah.
Because I said right there, and I was, last night,
Okay, do we need to, before we finish this, do we need to add anything to kindergarten?
American flag?
It's here, flag.
Oh, is it? I'm sorry.
Recognize, identify the flag as a symbol of our nation and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Anything else? I think that's good.
Me too.
Say currently our first grade curriculum has the flag, bald eagle, the statue of liberty, and the nation's capital.
So it's ours, like your first grader.
First grade. And it also has holidays that symbolize our government in the same spot. So that's Independence Day, President's Day, Memorial Day.
I think we put the national holidays in somewhere else.
Yeah, it's in first grade. It's under cultural traditions.
Greg, you never put anything about community symbols?
Okay.
No.
No, I just didn't write it down.
That's what knocks down all of the light poles around the Independence Courthouse, because they all have the truth banners on. And it was like a sale, like, oh, wow.
How funny.
Yeah.
Here's holidays. It's talking about characteristics.
I thought we put national somewhere, is that a chart thing?
It's on the chart.
It's on the chart, we haven't put it anywhere.
Oh, we didn't put it anywhere?
I don't think so.
I thought we did.
But these were cultural, so it would probably, in some ways, I think it's Fourth of July. Well, I was thinking, where would you put, like, because we put on the chart that we wanted to include national holidays, but where would you put them? Are they a symbol? Are they it's different a little bit, I think, than the tradition.
I agree. Yeah. Because they're legal, they're codified in law.
And here we have a kindergarten, national holidays and commemorations. And then it says celebration and
Here's national holidays.
president. We have that in both places.
Here it is.
Ah, okay.
I knew we put it somewhere.
So it's in history.
With a historical perspective.
That makes sense.
Gosh, we did do some good things here.
Hey, we've done a good thing.
Just can't remember.
So,
So it's with,
so should the
Where?
White House go
is
in
it just with the
kindergarten?
people there in the second, in the first grade box, under the contributions of significant persons?
Is who?
Where is the national holidays, is that where it's?
It's under kindergarten.
National holidays, national
But
holidays.
it's associated
With
different
people, though, right? So like, the 4th of July would not be necessarily talked about. Memorial Day would not be talked about.
Well, they're national holidays.
But they're not associated with people, things.
Sure.
Yeah, and mentors, and we go with Missouri.
Yeah, I guess let's use it with Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson would be associated with the Declaration of Independence, which would be flag.
Mhm.
After Christopher Columbus, they seem to be pretty good.
And so what national holiday is not associated with a person?
Independence Day, Veterans Day, Memorial Day.
Veterans Day is with a group of people. All the veterans.
Labor Day.
True.
No, I'm being Catherine Bladsky.
Thanksgiving.
So do we include national holidays somewhere on here then?
I think it probably, when we do whatever it is to organize it in a different way, it will connect clearly.
Okay. All right. So, anybody else want to add anything from K3? I think something's missing. We talked, what'd you say?
Community, grade 1.
So, give me the verbiage of what you're talking about.
Probably make it parallel to the above, except just in your community.
Symbols of your local community.
Yeah. Of symbols.
It would be a. What would you have, Aaron?
Well, we have in our town, Veterans Memorial.
I always think of.
We actually,
Yeah.
put it in there last year. Just to see. Yeah.
Bars and churches, I was there, I think they lost them. 800 people and 6 bars and 5 churches.
Bars.
Wow.
What's
That's
it?
really small, you know, grocery store.
We have, no, we've got, we do have the Civil War cave, the small one cave. But we've also got 3 or 4, so the second graders take a tour of Ozark. And there's like 4 or 5 stops, including the courthouse, and I mean, there's 4 or 5 stops in the tour.
I'm struggling with why we have both of them in the same first grade spot. But, I mean, I kind of get both of them. I can even see how they can teach the second one as a part of this whole thing. And, but it's almost like the nation symbols. I'm worried that there's just going to be kind of, oh yeah, we have some national symbols too, because everything else fits underneath a certain.
I think that will go with, like she said, it would connect to our history and all that when we have a different document. It'll be decided, not.
Way to make it.
You good with that? Are you okay?
What about grade 4 and 5? And this is a real chance to connect to some of the history.
That's what I was thinking about, symbols that come out of, like Uncle Sam, that come out of events or,
Civil War battlefields.
take with the ISIS flags be done, and they did that one because the baker didn't know what it
What that was.
represented. So then he had the opportunity to post all over, you know, here they do this, but they won't do this. And
Gotcha.
yeah. And
Again, I use parallel language and pick some such as for that represent the time periods that they'll be studying.
So they were fourth grade, Plymouth Rock.
maybe the colonial flag, you have,
You can see like the change in the flag and stuff.
and I think that Lewis and Clark symbol from the trails is really representing.
Well, and the gateway to the west, and that's what the arch symbol is.
It's a very big form of national symbols associated with historical events and time periods. Being studied, then you could just, that would be the same thing you put in fifth grade, right?
And then not listening,
Yeah.
Right, I think that would be fine.
that would give a lot of flexibility. And also open up then the teaching to opportunities to do, political questions if they wanted to, landmarks, whatever it may be.
Right, and we have not had anything past third grade in this strand, so I think that's important that we do.
Rosie Rivers.
So I was thinking too, yeah.
Right, we would go to the,
Hey, look at that. Yellow up there today. Hey, for us. All we needed was shovel here to make it work. How about C? You guys you feel ready for C? You want to take a break?
What was the?
C is understanding the main purposes of United States documents. We need that one.
there it is.
Oh, that's right.
Do we need that one? Because it's
Thought we were talking about how that and A are.
kind of entwined, aren't they? How do people feel? Tanya, you got a strong opinion on this one? State the main purpose, like
Yeah, that's
grade
the
3,
one.
there's only 2, right? There's only 2 in this whole strand. State the main purposes of the Declaration, explain the purposes of the Constitution.
Because we're talking, one here, we're trying to talk about purposes, and another, we're talking about principles.
Right. So
Right.
this is
So either a teacher understands it or not, that, I mean, they're talking about if we change this to principles and purposes, then we wouldn't need that line. If we don't, then I think we do need a line. Either or.
Yeah, because I think when this was laid out, it was really part of that discussion we were having yesterday, that the principles that are bigger than, it might have predated the
Right.
actual document. And then this is about the document.
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's,
Right.
I mean, the purpose of, it's not like there's 87 purposes to the Constitution.
Right.
The Declaration of
Right.
Independence.
Right.
The purpose of the Constitution was to create the federal government and define the limits that it had.
Yeah.
The purpose of the Declaration of Independence was to explain to the world, to the British, why we signed the Lee Resolution and declare our independence from Britain.
I mean, it's kind of that factual.
Very factual
Boom.
stuff.
So, yeah, I almost feel like what Craig was saying, just combine them,
And then,
and then we just delete that whole line. C just disappears. Because if you put the purposes and principles up above. Is there a way to do it, Greg?
Is there a way to what?
To combine purposes into the principles?
How would we word this differently?
Yeah.
In some ways, it also makes sense because that also helps them ground those principles for elementary school students.
With it.
You know, with the document.
So under fourth grade, do we just add this?
And then it's interesting, it goes down and also
Right.
identify the purpose.
Of the Constitution, which then comes right back.
So do we add these up there? Or do we change? Because it's kind of hard to change that to where you include the purposes and principles. Principles of and purposes for. You know, I don't know how to say that. We just keep them where they are and be done with it.
Are they in the right grade level? Or what we have above?
I think we all agree that students should know what the main purposes of these documents are. So it's got to be in there somewhere. It's just like,
Yeah.
where does it go?
Right.
How does it go? So
I personally think that the purpose should be stated first, and then the principles come after. If you don't understand the purpose of why you have something, you can't really define the core values that you're finding out there.
Just gotta hope that for teachers this season the same way.
Kind of have to go back a lot of this.
Yes.
What did you say, Patrick?
We can't put it like in a prioritized order, so
That's true.
we have to kind of put it in there and just hope that they would see it the same way. I would agree with you.
So I'll make a motion that we all go on break and make Craig do this. Now that we voiced our will.
Is there somewhere here we need to draw a distinction between a state constitution and a federal government constitution? Do you need to do something with that? When we have that in the past, I don't know if we need to just put it, just kind of.
Well, I mean, somewhere you do have to distinguish that the states are sovereign. And so they have their own government, they are their own entity. So that's it, I mean.
Yeah, I think it is important to recognize that Missouri has a state constitution. Passing amendments to it is a different process than passing amendments to
Yes,
the
that's something
national.
like describe the relationship of sovereignty between states and a nation.
That's a tough one.
Wow.
That's
But it's a great
How would you
concept
talk
for the
about
kids,
Missouri
right?
government without talking about that?
You have to concur.
How would you talk about the state constitution without talking about that?
I don't know if it needs to be third grade, except when you do state history. And that's why I do think it's hard sometimes to do the state,
Okay.
considering that historically, for the state of Missouri, it came after the Constitution
But-
of the federal government.
But the idea of states was first.
Right. Right.
So,
That's part of the ratifying the actual constitutional convention, when you're teaching all those things. But it's that, the state of Missouri, we talk specifically about that, it came kind of after it. Is there somewhere there's a distinction between what comes out of how do you determine what goes to state, what goes to federal government, how is that all done? Or can you say it should be later on? I mean, I do think it's something that's
Well, to me, I mean, when you talk about the purpose of the Constitution, the Declaration, all those things, I mean, there somewhere has to be an understanding or at least explanation that these colonies saw themselves as sovereign, their own nations, their own countries, entities, and they began to create this thing called the United States. Because, I mean, it's out of the states that
Well, maybe,
the central government was formed. I mean, it is,
maybe public sovereignty just becomes the concept of sovereignty, and you talk about both under, where it's up there under.
Popular
red, white, and
sovereignty.
green.
The popular sovereignty.
Isn't that 4th grade? Because that's when you're talking about colonization and.
Well, another way to think about it is that there's kind of introducing the idea, like the identify. And then there's understanding it at a deeper level. So I think children can identify the purpose of the Constitution. At earlier age, that they could explain and analyze the Constitution. Because we think of the DOK at that identify level. And again, all of the classroom teachers, is identifying the purpose of the Constitution, something that can be done. But I mean, what would be the earliest grade level that you would see that?
Aaron, you're teaching 3rd or 2nd grade?
Second.
Your 2nd graders identify the purpose of the Constitution after you taught us.
Yeah,
So form of government.
Yeah.
To create a federal government.
I mean, they understood that this year, I mean, they understood.
No, they're not gonna analyze
Yeah,
the text.
they're not gonna be able to tell you basically more than that.
Right.
But
And they're from that, they understand the language
language
or principles. But they would say,
It's, I forget exactly how we put it, but it's the framework for our government.
and the same with the Declaration, right?
Easier to reword it.
Yeah, we can do something first.
Understanding
Declaration.
of main purposes and principles of the United States documents. That would be a way to combine them, but I think it's easier to put language into the other than sort of language in the.
Right. Kathy suggested if we combined them, it might be easier to use some of this language instead. Understanding of the main principles and purposes of United States documents
Yeah.
might be easier than trying to change this
We
language.
should. And then we can combine that to that strand and.
Instead of United States documents, you could put the different ones like
Right.
the Declaration of Independence, Constitution,
Bill of Rights.
Bill of Rights.
Mhm.
I think you changed, those were the ones you changed yesterday.
Yes.
Because I was trying to figure out, so that's not what I have here, and that's why.
Mhm.
Right.
What do you guys think?
If we want to combine them.
I like the idea
that what you're talking about?
You know, the
Is it-
main principles or purposes.
Understanding.
Understanding of the main purpose, the principles contained in the declaration.
Purposes comes first. The main purposes.
Principles contained. Or just that.
Parallel that on the other ones.
Right.
So then where do you put the main purposes?
Excuse me?
No, where do you put learn the purpose?
Yeah, where does that go?
Yeah, does
Do we
the
have to
purpose
answer, I was
go?
wondering, do we have to answer what the purpose actually is?
It wasn't answered originally, and that's left up to each school district. But we
Or
don't
would
want
it be with
the
the
state.
citizens research and analyze the text of the declaration to determine its purpose and important principles that it contains? We just had 3 more. That is the longest run-on sentence there ever.
To determine
It's preamble.
It's right.
Preamble's all the sentence that you did, that's right.
okay.
So could we just shorten it to purposes and principles of the Declaration of Independence? Instead of the whole understanding of
Oh,
it.
yeah.
Just do purposes and principles of the Declaration of Independence. Grade 2, identify the purpose of the Declaration of Independence. And then we're set.
So you're suggesting that we take this out,
Yeah.
put purposes and principles of the Declaration of Independence. Then in grade 2, do what?
Identify the purpose of the Declaration of Independence.
Like that?
Change the column or the row header.
Where was that? Here. it is.
Or if you want to use that, for example. And then that header is his purposes and principles of the Declaration of Independence. Is that well done? And we do the same thing below for Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And the spirit taught together as founding documents and purposes.
Okay. Does it look good to everybody? We'll introduce that early.
So that was in third grade, you moved to second.
Third grade is the state. And it gives us a chance to teach about the state constitution. It's very compromised. So we get to introduce it early, but then we'll go and we'll get some more and understand in detail the principles of how they have that religious discussion. And in the middle, we might have there's a state. They have some.
Come back here. All right. There was also, in C, we also had this one.
Doesn't that sort itself out with the three different?
Let's go from
Rows.
identify to explain.
Yeah, it's going from identify down here to explain.
Right.
So if we put that up there, it would fit in here, right?
You might put that one first, though.
Above this
The
one.
purpose first and then followed by.
It's in third grade right now. Second grade?
It's in 40.
It's also
Oh, zero change.
Okay, so we're identifying purpose to explaining purpose.
We're going from identify the
Right.
purpose, just introduce both those documents, to where here now we're looking at Missouri's Constitution, to now we're understanding this whole big chunk.
I thought, where did the declaration purpose go? I thought that's the one that was going in second.
We could both. Unless you want to pick them out.
Would it,
Yes, what?
Supposed to be pretty day-to-day weather.
Let's get us a little worried about.
Supposed to rain.
Is it?
4 or 5 days after this.
Our yard has so many mole trenches and then the rain washes it out. I feel like when I'm mowing, I feel like it's like risky my life.
How's it doing for the farmers though? Did everyone get out, did they get stuff out before there were all the bad rain?
We had some things that were at the farm, I think like around 3. And it was only a few weeks ago that we were able to start.
Oh, gosh, that's horrible.
Our garden, I mean, it's been just so tough. I mean, the only thing we have right now is plants, everything else we wait so long to
Right.
plant.
I
Oh,
Is it
yeah,
all?
we, yeah,
That's all.
we have about half of our corn that we planted is just on the ground now.
That's why Excelsior Springs and Mosby and stuff, when the campgrounds that the boys are all at is in Excelsior and fields along the highway there to get to it, there's probably a couple thousand acres and it's just still from flooding and
Really?
continued rain.
That's all.
About 3 weeks ago, it was up to the road, it was down the mud now, but it's.
In our area, it's been okay, but we didn't know, we haven't had the flooding or the rain.
Slowly looking at it.
I'm trying to do.
Where's the declarations? Is it above this?
Yep. Declaration, there's the Constitution, and were we adding a third one about,
But I think there's a bill of rights underneath.
the last, yeah,
Above
here,
that fourth grade one?
here's the Bill of Rights here.
So you want to change the row there to match the other ones?
Yep. And that comes right before we start even talking about rights in the document. Doing anything about Bill of Rights up here already? We moved this part down?
Yeah.
I wonder if you could, I feel like that, the constant, the one in, I think it's second grade is just kind of hanging there. Above in the Constitution.
Yeah.
I thought it's Could it be that
Yeah, that
second
one
grade
too.
works with, Patrick was talking about the preamble yesterday, works with looking at principles of the preamble? What do you think, Aaron?
I'm sure it could be done.
I don't want to just keep piling things on. I'm just thinking,
I know.
how does that really layer preparation for what's coming actually a year later in fourth grade?
I know
You're
it.
kind of
A
skipping over
kindergartner could memorize
the
the
preamble, yeah.
My wife had one in her class this year that did it. Because her daughter, or her sister and my daughter are in fifth grade, and they were memorizing it. So the kindergartner, she did it too.
Yeah.
So I know she sat there and told me, oh.
Yeah, our
But
kindergartners
do
a
they
lot of time
really
in
know it?
yeah, really don't. But that's what I wondered if second grade, if you're getting into the
Right now,
actual
it would be
principles.
a-
ideas.
Process.
I'm just thinking, or maybe given, so at this point in second grade's curriculum, you have city law ordinances, you have regions.
What if we leave it, and then when we reorganize it, maybe even do something similar to this, we kind of see how some of these things go together. Because right now, you kind of feel like we have some of these several things in this one, it seems to be more in this one that kind of don't necessarily fit
What we're doing.
the thematic, but there may be ways, when we reorganize it by grade level, you can clump some of that stuff together, where it doesn't have to necessarily be in this format. You could actually just reorganize it in a different way. You know what I'm saying? So we could put some of those pieces together, just in the way that it's framed.
I mean, I understand the thinking behind, we don't want to wait to talk about the Constitution until fourth grade, but at the same time, it connects so much better there.
I mean,
It's
there
not
is,
something to hang on to.
well, there is there's a difference between are we spiraling it, or are we going to go, I mean, that's, talking about it once, if it looks like just like this, talking about it once to identify the purpose of the Constitution because it's in the document in second grade, if they don't really hear much else about it until fourth grade, isn't going to have done any good anyway. But do that, we want to make sure it's spiraled enough that it's something that you continue to come back to. But then how does that fit if it doesn't make sense with everything else? I don't know. So I think that maybe one where you just kind of hold on to it, and we have to look at it when we reorganize it. If it doesn't fit, then we figure it out then.
Right. Because you'll have 2 years of the Constitution. And you're learning it here and you're applying it here.
Right.
So for sure we have 2 years.
In elementary school, because then there's more later on too.
Right. And 6 on. But
But to me, what you're trying to really get at is the idea of states are both sovereign and united. And how do you make that?
Or if you just move it to identify why you may have a constitution, whether it's a state constitution or a national constitution, and it goes in as part of the conversation about why Missouri's constitution. Because up until that point, there's not many cities, but we have a city constitution. If you're identifying the purpose of having a constitution in general, would it make more sense just to have that right before you talk about it in third grade there?
so you're saying identify the purposes of a constitution.
Because the first constitution we had anyway talking about is not in depth looking at is not the U.S. Constitution, it's the Missouri Constitution. So they could identify the purpose of the Constitution. In my mind, that means, I think, federal government Constitution. Maybe that's just me. But if we make it more of a generic, a Constitution, then, so why does anybody need a Constitution? What's the purpose of having a Constitution? The state has a Constitution, and at some point in time, there's also the federal government constitution. But what's the purpose of having a constitution at all?
That seems more spiral to me. The way it is, that seems more.
To me, though, I guess I'm thinking there's a different purpose for the state constitution as opposed to the United States Constitution. Are they going in? How confident are they that?
Do we first start off with the similarities as to why have a constitution, and then that actually then leads to that very conversation about what's the difference between these two? Those are both constitutions.
He's not saying throw it out.
Right.
Throw that out. He's saying lay that foundation somewhere first.
Something's very, very broad and general as to why they're both called a constitution. There's some reason why they're both called a constitution. What makes them both a constitution? And then comparing what's the difference between a state constitution and a federal government constitution and how they kind of work together. If that makes any sense. I just don't, it may not, I don't, so I'll be honest, I've never really thought about what exactly, I know the Constitution, I know a state constitution, but just when I call it a constitution, what exactly the purpose of a constitution is, I've actually thought about it.
Is the concern that we're introducing the U.S. Constitution and leaving a gray area coming back?
For me, it's just,
So
it's just
it's-
like this thing out there.
Possible then, in terms of understanding the Missouri Constitution, put in language of how it's similar and different to the U.S. Constitution, so that we.
So compare and contrast.
The Missouri Constitution to the U.S. Constitution. And then we've got the
So
spiral.
instead of discussing the purposes and principles of it, like this is what we're talking about is the purposes and principles.
Could be
So-
compare and contrast the purposes and principles and
Because then we get to, again, still introduce the purpose of the U.S. Constitution early. We'll get to revisit that in fourth grade in comparison with Missouri principles and purposes, and then go back more deeply in fourth grade where they can really kind of dig into the principles more. So we keep the spiral going, and it's in context of Missouri in fourth grade. So there isn't that vacant year.
That's what's making me, it just feels like
Yeah, I
this thing
understand.
under there is like,
So instead of it, just explain why Missouri has a constitution. And there's some sort of language, compare and contrast to the U.S. Constitution, something like that. And that gives us a vehicle. And I think, and again, all of the classroom teachers, I think that's what you do anyway. When you're teaching the Missouri Constitution, you say, it's like the national, there's a national constitution, there's a state constitution. And they have the similarities and the differences. Well, I don't think we talk about principles until the next year.
So you're thinking just the purposes for now, and then you get the principles here. Because I'm thinking that's too much to teach in 1 year.
Right.
So you're thinking that.
Yeah. That way we get to introduce the Constitution early, the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution early. And they revisit it when setting the Missouri Constitution. And then they go in depth about the principles that are embedded in the document, when they're a little bit older, can handle more of the discussion elements of what do these things look like and why are they important and how do they play out throughout history. Our understanding of them has changed, not changed. Or the teacher was saying.
Okay, so I don't
know about putting that before you actually even talk to the U.S. Constitution.
Well, you have before.
if you talk about it here.
That's identifying the purpose. He doesn't really go in. Look at all what we're going into in there.
Yeah, but look, this is the purpose. We didn't put purpose.
I see. I just think just the purposes of the two. I guess not going into too much in depth of it. I just think we will have identified the purpose a year ahead of time, and then to have this comparison in there when we haven't actually talked about it for a full year, what the purpose of the U.S. Constitution is. I think you can compare and contrast. You're getting into a little bit more about, right? Maybe it's a different skill that you would require some sort of deeper knowledge about the two things. Point out similarities and differences from them. But if we're just talking about the purposes, how far we're going to be able to go with it.
So you're thinking explain the similarities and differences of...
I think that's a very in-depth question. I mean, I think you could put it in how far are you going to go with what's the two differences and the way the systems work, how far are you going to go with that? I think we're just talking about the purposes. I guess it could be different ones, but what's really the answer to once there is set the rules for a state and once there is set the rules for a federal government, I mean, what's the real...
You could leave it that.
It could be that
shallow or general, or go more in depth.
What do you teach right now about the Missouri Constitution?
You probably don't in a second.
Basically, that it's the framework for the government. I mean, that's,
essential definition of it.
yeah.
Or at any time?
In fourth grade.
Okay, what they teach about
There's something about Constitution Day, and I don't know, I just know our administration says on Constitution Day you need to teach Constitution.
the U.S. ones.
They do that.
And
But that's what I'm saying, when you teach right
basically
now about the Missouri
that's what
Constitution,
you
anytime in elementary school.
explain to them the purpose, I guess, of it, and not really the principle.
So on Thursday, September 17th of this year, you check this box.
Exactly.
About the U.S. Constitution, thanks to Senator Byrd of West Virginia.
Right.
But what about the Missouri Constitution? What currently is taught about the Missouri Constitution at any point in elementary school?
So right now in our curriculum in fourth grade, we have the U.S. Constitution is a document that contains the laws and rules that govern the country. The Missouri Constitution is a document that contains the laws and rules that govern the state. And then by the end of fourth grade, all students should be able to evaluate the structure and basic provisions of the United States and Missouri Constitution. Bill of Rights are also in there. 3 branches of the Missouri government and their functions, the 3 branches of the U.S. government and their functions.
But that's what I'm saying. Typically, I think we teach state government in conjunction with federal. How are they similar? How are they different?
assessment done, maybe we'll have to determine what level they want that to go to. Different assessments, what you're gonna consider proficient to answer.
Right, that's a local decision. Okay, so we're discussing the third bullet down, compare and contrast purposes. Aaron? What's your thinking on that? Patrick just gave his.
Where it says identify the person.
No, compare and contrast the purposes of the Missouri and U.S. constitutions.
I like the way it is. Because that is third grade, correct? So, we're gonna be doing both at that point. You have to have something like he said to compare it to.
I missed the discussion at the end, so that identify the purpose of the Constitution would stay as second.
Yes, and then you do both at third. And then you do the principles of fourth. Shelley?
Can you remind me what we put in about founders? Do we include founders and so on, or but that says community founders and so forth, right? I'll actually look at
Do you have
Sorry
it?
to interrupt.
No, do you have it?
I can.
Okay, Shelley, what do you think?
You're talking about that compare and contrast purposes?
Yes. This one. As a way to understand the Missouri Constitution and a way to set us up for the in-depth look at it in fourth grade.
I think it's easier to do the explain the differences versus compare and contrast. I think that's just the way. I mean, I don't know what's easier to teach, compare and contrast to me, it just would take a lot more. Maybe that's what you want.
I think explain similarities and differences.
You think that's too, is that what we changed it from? Is that what you heard?
No, we didn't. We just wrote this one just now.
While I was texting.
So we've just, yeah. Hey, you have enough going on in your life today that we need to.
Anyway, I don't know, what's easier to make sense of?
Well, in my thinking, they're saying the same thing. Compare and contrast or explain similarities and differences. In my,
Compare is telling likenesses, contrast is telling differences.
I guess I would just say, explain the difference, but yeah, I mean, if you did similarities and differences, it's the same. Like, there's a lot of information to go over both constitutions. It's important, but that age difference.
I think that's why we restricted it to the purposes.
Okay, then it's making more sense, but what, beyond setting a structure or framework, what would you teach them?
It would be up to local control. It would be up to local control. Because we don't want to tell, local district.
No, I agree. I'm just saying, where do you go with that? Where could you go? Because I don't know how that translates to classroom, I guess is what I'm asking. What beyond setting up the framework, the structure of government?
Well, if you went into the differences, the contrast, then you could talk about some of the mechanisms of individual documents. You would really want to explore that as a classroom teacher.
So was that?
Or not.
Is that really coming from the purposes?
That's what I'm saying, the actual purposes. What do you? I mean, I'm literally asking, I'm not
As
even
simple
asking.
as making an amendment to the state constitution, the purpose of the federal, it tells how that's done, and the purpose of the state also says how it's in and they're different.
So that's how
So I mean, those purposes you could, I mean, I'm not saying you would, but I mean, you could get that in depth, but it just depends on the teacher or the curriculum director, whoever is.
I mean, there'd be a lot more comparisons than there would be contrasts. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
Well, I think you bring up a good point. We're not listing any purposes there. So it takes me then, I go to the next part, we're talking about principles. Why are we listing any principles? If we're not listing any purposes. Because if we're leaving the purposes up to the school districts to decide what that is, why are we not leaving the principles up to them to decide if those things are as well? Because I mean, I'm just thinking, why are we telling them these are the things we want included for principles, but we don't want to include anything for purposes?
So funny, I can hear Laura in my head right now. You remember Laura? Because she's always like, but we got to help the teacher know exactly.
Well, that's why I asked, what do you do? I don't know how this translates in the classroom at all, but I just, that's a beyond framework. I don't really know
I
that.
think it is the complexity. The purposes are a little bit less, is a less complex issue than the principles are, because like we were doing yesterday, you were reading through and saying, well, where is this principle in the document? Why are we specifying it? And it's because it's not as a general statement. There's specific principles that within, whether it's total science or within government, that are hallmarks of our Constitution that have now been replicated around the world in other nations' constitutions.
Well, that brings the point up to me. It's even more dangerous in my mind to list what the principles are, because I wouldn't list many of those as principles of the Constitution.
I think you'd be in minority in terms of
But my point is,
Not that you don't have minority rights. I'm just saying, these are generally
So
accepted.
that's kind of our principle, and that's what I mean, the purpose of it was to give the power to the people and not the
And
Oh,
to
there's
set up
simplification of
that-
everything.
Right, to set up that system, right.
Right, set up the system, thank you. That's
Well,
what
the purpose of the Constitution was to create the federal government.
Right.
I mean, it didn't exist before the states created it.
Okay, so
It was just the states. But that's where they're saying, well, we don't want to list what those are and tell them what they have to do. And my point is, okay, that's fine, we're not going to do that there, but I don't think we should do it with principles either. I think we should leave that for each school district to determine for themselves what they're going to consider the principles. If it's just an overarching document to get them to, hey, wait a minute, we want to talk about the principles of the Republic, we want to talk about the purposes of the documents, then we shouldn't be telling them what those are, unless we're telling them what everything is.
So what if we change that, including to such as,
Yeah, so it's a change. I don't know.
just to give an idea, not necessarily this is what happened.
Then are you going to be able to
Because
set
my
that?
thought-
And then given us us you're asking the Constitution.
Yeah. Because.
Framing of government.
I'm with you, I mean,
Branches
the
of
purpose,
government.
I can think of a couple things, as a teacher,
To me, that's-
a curriculum director is gonna be able to.
Yeah.
Learn more about it, spend more time with it.
So we could do a such as.
So to me, I think of purpose and I think of the why.
That's why I said first.
It is, the reasoning for it is why we have it. Structure indicates to me how it takes place. Then principles, to me, are the underlying, they transcend all. Anything else, they're transcending ideas. But to me, purpose explains why. And I
So
don't-
what would it be?
So you're saying.
That's what I'm saying, means the purpose of the United States Constitution was the states created federal government. The purpose of the Constitution was the creation, that it's a compact between the states that created the federal government. That's the purpose of the U.S. Constitution. Well, the state constitutions is where really the power lies within the states. And so state constitutions are going to be different all across the country. They're going to have different, they have different purposes.
Is their purpose?
Except to protect their sovereignty. I mean, the main purpose of the state constitution would be protect their sovereignty.
So that's the purpose.
And, I mean, what other purpose is there? I mean, we have structures. I mean, the Constitution.
I would say that the purpose is to set up the structure of government. If you read the text, all the text is valid. The purpose is to set up the structure of government.
So,
And I'm always going to say the purpose is to define the limits of government.
Are those different?
Well, that's why I say that's overall principle to it. You have purposes, they don't have the limits of the government. To me, it goes under the purpose of having. We talked about
Somewhere along the line, someone decided they needed to have this created, whether it was to create, to determine how much the government can or can't do, or what they, all those things are part of the structure. The limits are part of what that actually means, and it's still part of what's determined throughout. Now, as part of trying to figure out what's constitutional, what's not. So how does it fit is still part of those things that are kind of going into it. But why did they decide we needed to have these constitutions? And one that I can figure is that they felt like if they're going to have some sort of a government structure, then there needs to be some sort of a structure to it.
We use the Bill of Rights Institute a lot in our district curriculum writing, but the way that they distinguish it in terms of purposes is that the Bill of Rights places specific limits on government power, and the Constitution puts a structure to government. That's how it separates the purposes of those things. The Bill of Rights is what actually limits the national power.
I mean, to me, then I don't understand why we would use compare and contrast the structures of Missouri and U.S. Constitution. Because I don't think, I'm just, for me, a purpose is why you use structure explains how it's done. And if we're comparing and contrasting what everybody's talking about, really the structure of how it's then it's more, that would be more wording that I would think would be used.
I just think it's very general. One's there to, the purpose of the Missouri one is to set the structure for a state government. The purpose of the federal is to set up the federal structure. And that's essentially it. That's the answer.
But that's not what I would say is the purpose of it. I mean, I get that the structure is there, but the purpose of the Constitution was to actually create a central government.
So it's
It's the creation of something,
Right.
and they define the structure of it.
Right, and we still have to go into, because we don't do that, we can't go honestly go through all the final points of what that structure is. It's looking at, the difference between, so the state is exactly the same thing, except for they're saying the central federal government is the state government. So just take out the central government, put in the state government, and you can say the same thing. The only difference is that one's a state level, one's a central federal level. So you can still say the same thing, but getting into the minutia of the structure.
But isn't, I mean, what is there to contrast in the purpose?
So maybe it's
That's what I'm saying, like,
One state, one federal, and that's really the
distinguish between the purposes and distinguish between the purposes of the state and the U.S. Constitution.
I guess for me, it comes back to I guess there is a difference to me, so I'm just trying to, I mean, I get what you're saying, the structures, all, I mean, I understand what you're saying, I just don't think I agree.
So you would say the purpose of it is what? That's what I'm trying to say. I don't know, that's what I thought. I just feel like the purpose is to put some sort of a structure. I mean, if comparing and contrast the purposes and the structures, what I would maybe look at was if we put and the structures in there, then yeah, we're going to go a little bit more in depth to it. If it's just the purpose. Yeah, I guess I'm not seeing the purpose of the Constitution other than to provide structure to the government, to provide the rules, to provide the operating procedures and structures for the government. One's a state, one's a federal. They both, there's a reason why they both have it. I was actually, also now I actually just went and Googled what Webster considers the definition of it. And essentially that's what it says. It's just the laws and structures that are going to say how it's going to function. And so long as they do put the procedures in place for how the federal government is going to function, it was there to put the procedures in place for the states.
So do we include any of this into the appendix? The appendix, the national appendix we're going to write. Is that something we include in there? Are we getting too deep? The reason I would argue that we need to A through G is that there is many more reasons why you would say the principles of the Constitution. Well, we don't have the time nor the kids don't have full understanding to list all of those. So which ones are the ones we want to tackle first and say everyone in Missouri are going to learn this set this year, and by 8th grade they've got to learn this set. That's if we have kids who are moving around from school district to school district and we don't list these out like this, then potentially if I'm in the Ozark School District and we go through this set on 4th and we talk about it in 5th, by the time I move districts to Nixa and they only cover these other ones here, I'm in that whole reasoning of. So I think the reason we need to have listed is this is guaranteed across the state that we are actually covering these large principles from our Constitution. And every kid understands this set in 4th, they apply it in 5th. Because if you leave it to different districts to come up with when they teach those particular principles, you could have kids moving from district to district who miss those principles altogether. If I cover something in 5th instead of 4th, or if I cover it in 6th and I move districts, then I miss that. So that's why I would argue we probably need those defined set, so we know exactly when we're covering it statewide. So everybody's going to get it. We're not telling the districts to which depth they have to teach it, but we're telling them that those have to be taught. So no matter where in Southwest Missouri you land, based on your dad's job or lack of job, you're going to get those somewhere throughout the year. So let's talk through, let's go back and start again on this one. We've changed it, we've added a word or two. Should we keep it, should we change it, should we leave it? Kathy, let's start with you. What do you think?
I'm okay with this as contrast. So you're looking at the differences.
Okay. And here you've got the why, and here you've got the what. Number two more kinds, okay? All of you good as is. What do you think, honey? You're good with it like it is?
On that particular one,
Right, yes.
that's fine.
What do you think, Michelle?
We already went over all that. Yeah.
Okay,
I think
we
it's
can
fine.
leave it as is, okay. You good? What do you think, Patrick?
This is where you had deeply we're going to go into the structures and we haven't fully taught the Constitution. Everybody we do go through the Constitution in 4th grade, or is that what it's 3rd grade?
Third grade. So they're going to hit some of the pieces. Because there are some similarities between structures.
And just when we say structure as well, I think that could get pretty in-depth depending on how, I just don't know.
Depending on,
I'm wondering where the U.S. Constitution, the structures of the U.S. Constitution fits into 3rd grade. And we are then going to go into 4th grade and go into what looks like the major purpose of the Constitution that we just talked about. Structure, when we put structures in there, to me that seems to be going more in depth, which means a greater deal of time and teaching into what that structure actually is.
well, when your curriculum director writes what y'all are going to do, you can tell him, hey, just do a little less.
I just think in order to be able to do that effectively and efficiently, you're going to have to go pretty deep into the structure of the two constitutions. Spend a lot of time actually to compare and contrast what they both have. I mean, and it depends on how.
You know what I will tell our people.
Break through branches.
Right. What I will tell our people is, I want you to consider that bullet a DOK 1 or very low level of 2 in the assessment document.
Well, good, so that is down.
So what does structure mean? How it's organized or the content?
Organization.
Do we really need it then? I mean, I don't know.
It's for the organization of the government.
They both have a preamble.
The organization of the document.
So that's the thing, that's what I think she's bringing up. Is it the document or is it the
Right.
governmental structures?
I think
Or is
it'd be
it
the
both?
governmental. I think probably be governmental.
Like they both have 3 branches.
Right.
That's.
And one is executive branch, the executive branch is state level, the
Here's
governor, and the other is.
purposes and governmental structures outlined in.
That's what
I'm
I
wording.
said, something
I'm wording.
a little more specific that way. Because then, yeah, we're looking at the preamble. That'd be pretty simple to do though, for that grade level.
And in some ways, it helps you understand what the Constitution is, because there's a preamble, there's articles about the structure of government. There are rights, sections that talk about rights.
Part of me, if I'm a third grader, part of me wants to say, who cares? So if we're not careful, we're just teaching a bunch of facts where kids are saying, who cares? I mean, they're going to tie it into some type of the Missouri history. It's not to be tied into Missouri history to really make
Right.
the relevance.
Right.
Okay, so were you, let's make it yellow. If you want to make and structures green, make the rest of it yellow.
Compare and contrast the purposes of Missouri and the U.S. Constitution in the general government structures that were created by both. When you say the structures of the Missouri and the U.S. Constitution, that says to me that you're actually talking about the document.
The way it's listed in the document, not agree government.
So what we're actually going to compare and contrast the purposes of the Constitution
And governmental org.
and the general governmental structures that were created by both.
What did you just say?
That does say to me that says you're actually talking about
The document.
Does the Missouri Constitution have Articles 1, 2, 3? Is there a Bill of Rights? Is it not a Bill of Rights? I mean, is that
Which version?
Right, is that what we're talking about?
First, second, third, fourth?
Actual.
Right, the other way to put it is pretty painful.
Yeah.
For me to read, is to do a such as.
I would do such
Compare and
as.
contrast the
such as
purposes
branch
and governmental
government.
structures
I think if we're just talking about like
outlined in the Missouri and U.S. Constitution.
it's pretty easy to see each, that both of them have three branches, that both documents create three branches of government. Both documents do these, there's some similarities there.
Gotcha.
The differences are that at the state level is the governor, and is the executive, and at the federal level is the
Actually, it's a
president.
little more similar to the state
Right, just the different
constitution.
names.
Okay, so here's two different ways we just discussed it. Compare and contrast the purposes and governmental organizations outlined in, that's not the right word.
The organizations.
Governmental
I must have, structures maybe is what I was listening to three people talk at one time.
Mhm.
Okay. Outlined in the Missouri and U.S. Constitution. Or we do compare and contrast the purposes and structures outlined of the Missouri and U.S. Constitution, such as, and we list branches. You don't think?
If you say, I think if you say governmental structures, I don't think you can.
Yeah, I would do both.
But I don't think you can get structure. And I know I tend to be wordy, but in some ways, I honestly think if you had some, maybe just 2 or 3 bullets under the purpose, so like the declaration, if you add bullets that said, affirm inalienable rights, list grievances, declare independence, and under the U.S. Constitution, if you had to place limits on government and outline government structures, I think that would be helpful to teachers, but that maybe
Maybe something.
we may not agree on, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I'd be fine with that, if that's,
I do think it would be helpful. I just think of questions
But it
like
might
that.
not go
But,
here.
well, it would, the way she's saying
I
it,
gotcha.
the way she's saying it, it would fit here, if you do it that way.
What about just compare and contrast the Missouri and U.S. Constitution?
So go really.
I'm afraid if you do that, they're gonna pick up the principles and purposes, and then it's gonna be just that much more. So they may try to do at that point.
What is the reason we're wanting them to compare and contrast the two constitutions? What's the idea behind it?
Yeah, I think one of them is that Missouri wanted them to know that Missouri has a constitution. And that's the grade level where we're teaching all about Missouri. the second thing about the U.S. Constitution was brought in because we kind of introduce it earlier and then we go into it more depth later. And the idea is to provide an opportunity to kind of reintroduce it again, to spiral it, so that we don't have a missing year, so to speak. So there's kind of two with, and then I think the third thing is that in practice, they're taught together. You don't teach one legislation on the other. You don't teach about the Missouri Constitution on itself, by itself. It's always kind of, so there's kind of three reasons to do it together.
Playing with what you said just for a second. What were you, what did you say?
I had affirmed inalienable rights, religious grievances, and declared independence.
And what?
Declared independence. Because I mean, I think how I see it taught was taught generally, they really talk in terms of declaring independence, and they don't really talk about the other two things, that they're just rights that everybody should have. I think that.
And so then you would, underneath here, you would do what? Which ones would you put here then?
I was just saying that the way that they separate them, that they lay it out was that the Bill of Rights was to limit.
Well, this one's not a Bill of Rights, so.
No, but it's part of.
It would be limit government.
Limit government and.
Framework for the structure of government. And then there's the supremacy clause. I don't know, maybe that comes later if we touch on that.
Let me know what you're talking about.
The Constitution is supreme law of the land. I think it's Article 4. I don't remember the Constitution that well. But it's the supremacy clause held by our very first amendment in the early 1800s. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, ultimately. Unless the Supreme Court decides. Interpretation.
Created,
That was a hangover. I mean, the development that came out of the articles. And both, it was tried a little bit in the articles.
But my point is,
And the
that's
reason
what
we
we're
don't have them
going
elected by the public is that they could be influenced by having to run for election because the legislators every several years and be controlled.
Anyway, but my point is not what is taking place. My point is what was taking place at that time. What was in, I don't see anywhere when I read anything by our founders, anything in the Constitution, the Declaration, that when we talk about the Supreme Court is the arbiter of the law, that what they say goes. I mean, if you read the history of where we came from, that would be absolutely contrary to what our founders thought or believed. But I don't want a today's interpretation. I want to know. I mean, I can go read just like you can any of today's interpretations of it, but it doesn't mean that that's the truth. It doesn't mean that's what it is. What did our founders say? What are their words?
Right, so I'm looking at the actual articles, Article 6. The Constitution and laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land. And the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution and laws of the state will come to understanding.
Well, as long as those laws as our Constitution.
Right, absolutely, you're exactly right. Exactly right.
I guess my concern on what you're saying
And who
is
determines their constitutionality? The Supreme Court.
I don't think that the Constitution determines their constitutionality.
But it has to be interpreted by someone, and that someone is the Supreme Court.
They offer an opinion on the constitutionality.
It's a pretty binding opinion.
Well, it does, I will give you that today it is. We've made it now, but back in that time period.
Marbury versus Mass in the 1800s established that the Supreme Court had to have that authority.
I think the Marbury decision, the Supreme Court gave themselves that authority.
Right. And
Right.
it's held ever since.
But the point is, that's not, that was, I mean, what I can give myself the authority to do anything, does that mean I actually have it unless, I mean, how can an unelected, in a republic, how can an unelected body give themselves the power to do something and nobody can stop them from, I mean,
I
nobody
guess
has.
because they did. And
Well,
it's been that way since the 1800s.
Well, but my point is though, aren't we wanting to teach the actual foundation of our nation, not necessarily what has come as a result, but the actual foundation of our nation? Because, I mean, I could build a house on a bad foundation and it's going to eventually crumble. But if I teach if I build it on a good foundation, it's not going to crumble.
So what would be a good foundation in this sense?
Well, the three purposes, do we need a third one, or are these two enough?
No, I'm not sure what we're discussing honestly. Are we discussing?
Well, we
bullet?
were talking about the bullet as supremacy clause.
Oh, okay.
And that's what, yeah.
Okay.
So do we need that bullet?
I am comfortable with not having it in. Especially at grade level.
Right.
Later on, they'll get to those cases when they start dealing with historical, when we start teaching, the development in the United States and how the checks and balances developed and all separation of powers and all that develops, and you're going to get into the Supreme Court rules and the articles of the Constitution in detail. But at the second grade level, that would be a little bit.
Well, in the 11th grade, we parsed that out pretty heavily.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's not in our purview.
Where are we getting? Was the purpose of creating the Constitution to limit government, or was that the role of the Bill of Rights, which is just
That's in the Bill of Rights. So it might, we haven't got down to that other.
So do we, when we have Bill of Rights down here, do we put limited government?
I think first the Constitution must establish limited government. Absolutely.
And the Bill of Rights gave the power to the individual. Maybe it's the way
Yeah.
to
Protect
word that.
individual rights.
It enumerates,
It did both, limited government,
Specific.
protect individual rights.
enumerates specific individual rights.
So I think the purpose for all of it was to limit.
And to make the difference, that's right, between the monarchy that they experienced up at that time.
And then what? Protect. Individual rights.
Gave
Enumerate.
power to the individual.
That's, I mean, that would be
Gave
the
power to
term.
the individual.
Enumerate what?
Basic civil rights.
For the individual rights, citizens' rights. The rights of
Well-
citizens, right? Bill of Rights. The rights of all citizens of the United States.
I'm trying to think of one, isn't it? Well, but let's see, we have separation of church and state, but that's not written as an individual.
Protect individual liberty.
Protect individual liberty.
You're always checking the Bill of Rights website, what do they say? Do they have a nice catchphrase for this?
It says, Constitution, the first amendments of the Constitution make up the Bill of Rights. Calls, responds to calls from several states referring to constitutional protection for individual liberties, lists specific prohibitions on governmental power.
So,
that's
do we leave limit government, or do we want to use their language of list prohibitions on government power?
Well, there's then the next paragraph is how they all disagree.
Yeah, some complicated, some got the different.
Right. Which is the same debate that goes on today.
So, yeah, so the question is, do we use limited government, a term that we used before, or do we add this new term, prohibit governmental, what was it? Powers?
Prohibitions on governmental power.
Yeah, prohibitions on governmental powers, kind of mean limited government, but matter of specificity. I'm comfortable with limited government.
You're for keep limited government, so it reads the same for.
But I would be opposed to the other.
Sure.
Someone else strongly the other way.
I don't feel strongly either way.
Anyone else? Is this in a Wayne ceremony, speak now, forever hold the peace?
Yes.
Never
We always circle back around. Okay, so, there, that is good. If we're looking at Bill of Rights, do we keep what they have here? This was the original belief.
What and what is it?
Yeah, identify important principles of the Bill of Rights, such as basic rights and freedoms. See Amendments 1 through 8. For rights not listed, see Amendment 9. I'm just leaving it there.
So the B underneath that is role of citizen and government carrying out constitutional principles.
Right.
Is that the same pretty much?
So this is talking about the role of the citizen, where this is talking about the actual principles within it. I know you can teach it together, but
Yeah.
I think that's the delineation.
I think we could take out, we want an E, so that E goes up to third grade, 1, 2, 3, and
Okay,
then fourth grade
1, 2,
takes up
3,
the
4.
one above. I mean, I could.
Oh, I see what
do
you're
that.
saying, yeah.
I mean, it would,
Let's say that again.
I do think they are done together. So I think if you are doing what's in A under fourth grade, identify important principles, that you don't really need it in B.
You don't
I think
need
you will
it
do
here.
it, but I would keep what's in B for first, second, third. Does that make sense?
You keep the
I would keep those.
these.
But where it would carry on and spiral, and fourth would be in the string, in the one above.
In this one.
Yeah.
So do we want to say principles and rights?
Mm-hmm.
And so, because I don't want us to
Principles and rights
lose.
and the Bill of Rights, such as.
Yeah, because I don't want us to lose the teaching.
Well, it says
of the
such as
right.
basic rights and freedoms, though. It's identify important,
Yeah,
so it is there.
yeah, it's true, it's already there, isn't it? Yeah, so we should probably remove it.
Is there anything in here that they were worried wouldn't get taught?
The ones they list are all in the,
I mean, they're all in the first 10.
yeah, they're all in the first 10.
You could also feasibly replace what's in the parenthesis with that language in the second stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
You could start with including,
right,
And put that where the parenthesis is,
yeah,
like that.
good. I like that, so, yeah, I think that way we keep them both in, but it's much more concise and it's not repetitive, because right now it's a little bit redundant, how it's written.
so you're thinking, okay, freedoms, so, including these things, and then take this out of there.
I think it's more clear.
So there are two including words here.
Should interview those little preschool here kids out there, see what they can do. Look at they're tiny. They're a tiny group.
Should you say the basic rights to citizens?
And explain the rights of citizens in the second and E below.
You're thinking on grade 4. If we're going to take it out of,
So,
you're taking it out of this one, then to include the word citizen somewhere up here.
Well,
Well, because
these
it's
are
in
basic rights for a citizen. So, just, I don't know, should we put it on?
And visitors, right?
Huh?
I mean, and visitors. We could extend them to visitors as well. Legal or non-legal.
actually, you could, so just identify important principles in the Bill of Rights, such as basic citizen rights and freedoms, including religion. You could take that second freedoms out, including
Right.
religion, speech, trust to a symbol.
Okay, so.
That would pare down the words a bit
Okay.
and allow room for citizenry.
I'm going to just play with it over here and then I'll case it over. So, identify. Okay, identify important principles in the Bill of Rights, such as basic,
Rights of citizens. Basic citizens' right. Yeah,
It's not citizens.
It's,
Maybe not, that's why I asked.
right, maybe not.
I do think we could still take out the second freedoms, because it says freedoms, including freedoms,
Right.
including speech, or religion, speech, press. Yeah.
Are we dictating that these are the only ones?
Well, my thing always goes back to, I mean, you read why the Bill of Rights is including the arguments on both sides, if we don't want the government to then come along and say, well, these are what you're saying your rights are, so we can infringe on everything else. So there was all that argument as to whether they were going to do that or not. So when you list those things, then I feel like that's listing what we're saying our rights are, rather than, I mean, I think the reason that, those who are arguing against including a Bill of Rights were okay with it is because of the 9th and 10th Amendments to those Bill of Rights, where the 9th Amendment basically says, hey, nothing that we've listed here, obviously, it's the things that we've listed of certain rights aren't to be construed as to deny other rights that are retained by the people. So basically, we have all rights. It doesn't, I mean, there's not a limit to our rights, according to the 9th Amendment. There's a limit to the federal government, to what they can do. So my concern is you're listing these things as though those are our actual rights. And that's where we go back to, we're like, somehow we're put in this box where we have to define what we're saying is inalienable to us.
That's coming back to Paul's topic, they were talking, we believe our rights are that we have. And you're saying by listing this, it looks like government's giving us these rights.
But this exists.
Say that
Look,
again.
we talk about principle, but there is a document called the Bill of Rights.
Right, I agree, it doesn't
And
say
so-
anything.
But I mean, and maybe it's not, here's my thing is, maybe, in grade 3, we can talk about the Bill of Rights and what's in it, but until you can go, until your kids are old enough to understand the arguments and the debates as to whether it should have been or not, and the fact that by adding the 9th and 10th Amendments to the Bill of Rights, gave those who didn't want it in there the okay to put it in there, because the 9th and 10th Amendments are like really important. I mean, that's the reason why those opposed to it were willing to let it be put in there. And so my concern is we're telling third graders these are your rights, when actually what the Bill of Rights does is enumerates that we have all rights except for those few that have been defined for the federal government to have charge over.
And then we codify them in this document. So how would you, I mean, I'm assuming you would want students to know that there is a document called the Bill of Rights. Right. So how do we word this in a way that we say that there is this document that's called the Bill of Rights, and you should teach that such a document exists and what's in it? Because I think that's where we're kind of balancing back and forth.
It makes 4th grade really heavy, but should it be the same language as looking at, as the declaration about looking at the text and analyzing? We finished while you were
Perfect.
Oh
my God.
car seems very intensive.
Yeah, I'm trying to read.
So we're introducing the Bill of Rights as a document in grade 3, right?
Mm-mm. No, I just put it over there to play with the text.
Oh, okay.
I'm just playing with the text. It's in 4th grade. Sorry to confuse you. I'm sorry.
Did we parallel what we did above, which is that they're in 3rd grade, we talk about the purpose of the Bill of Rights?
Well, the state doesn't have one.
So 2nd grade?
But if you use that with assistance, research, and analyze the text of the Bill of Rights to determine important principles and rights that it contains.
One way to handle it is to do with the same sort of thing that we did above with the Constitution and the Declaration. You just do it with the Bill of Rights.
Well, we can go back to the original language. And we don't list any of those out. And we just put for rights listed, see amendments 1 through 8, for rights not listed, see amendments 9. We could just leave it that plain. And then every district's going to determine what depth they go into. And really depending on your teacher and their, either they're a federalist or an anti-federalist. Right, I mean, that's the bottom line.
But if they have, I mean, yeah, and if they try, I mean, really, I mean, we're not, yeah, and that should be okay.
Okay.
Because we don't have an equivalent for the state.
Do what?
We don't have an equivalent document in the state at the state level.
Right.
So, we can't really.
Well, we could introduce it in grade 2, and then just wouldn't hit it again until we get to grade 4. And maybe that's a difference that they come up with right here.
Right.
So it's been introduced here.
State that was the difference between the state and the national constitution. You know, so many people have purpose races I saw there, it just seems to find people. But have you seen that? Have you seen that? A lot of people don't have. A lot of people with purposeful racism. The best person I've seen since I've been here.
What are you thinking of now?
Hmm.
What are you thinking about now?
Well, we just changed, so grade 2, they hear, they get an introduction to a general overview of the Declaration, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. In grade 3, then they're comparing and contrasting the two constitutions. And then in grade 4, they actually go into research and they look at these texts and they talk about the principles behind this or involved in that. The principles located in this document and the principles located in this one. which would be this bullet here. Okay. Now to finish up this strand, we need to talk about, do these make sense where they are, these ones that are not highlighted? And we need to go back down and discuss role of citizens. And that's it. I think that's it. Then we move to government. So, let's just talk through these bullets and discuss do they belong here or not. So Shelley, what we talked about yesterday was, if these are the principles found in the Constitution, then how do we scaffold them backwards for kids to move into an understanding of this? We talked about there's a difference between rules and laws. There's rules made at school. There's rules made at home. Then there's the governmental laws. But the analogy between a home and the government is not a clear analogy at times, because it breaks down when my kids are young, especially the older they get, the less control I have. But when my kids are young, it's a monarchy. And my wife and I are at the head of that. But the understanding of why do we create rules can't be the same in that analogy. So I create rules because I want you to have those inalienable rights, which is life and liberty and the pursuit of your happiness. So I don't let you play near the street, because your pursuit of happiness will end if you get hit.
Unless you're a free-range parent.
Unless you're a free-range parent. And that goes back to some video people.
That's a previous inside joke.
So,
look at video 6 or 7, and you'll see what we discussed it.
Which I wasn't. So, my monarchy didn't include the free-range parent.
So then what do you say to a child of that age to compare that to government?
Laws are made for similar purposes that you make rules, or what laws and rules are similar. Some laws and rules have similar purposes, like safety.
I just don't like the correlation of government.
That's what we were struck by.
Right, that's what we were saying yesterday. I'm with you completely.
So, and really, a law or a rule doesn't create safety. I mean, really, what laws and rules do are an attempt to prevent people from doing something that they're otherwise ready to do.
Right.
So it doesn't create safety, because otherwise, if our laws made people safe, then we would no longer have, murders, because it's against the law to murder.
Right.
But we've had murders
Right.
to dawn on.
Yeah.
So the law does not create safety or any of those things. It's an attempt to prevent someone from doing something they're free to do.
Right.
So how far did you get in that discussion?
Well,
You circled.
that's why it's not yellow.
We kind of toilet rolled it. It gets all around here.
That's the reason it's not yellow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is the
That's
scaffolding.
what I was
Great,
Is
that's
the-
got 6 hours right there.
And is the scaffolding
It's all
worth
law.
it? Is the scaffolding worth it?
But you can look at, if you're talking about the classroom, you can look at how rules and laws can be somewhat the same. But that's an analogy
Yeah.
that somewhat works.
Or are we putting something in a curriculum that's really the first month of school? Anyway, when you're establishing procedures and routines and how you function as a class, is it?
Do we ever say why?
Is it?
Depends on.
You mean like to throw it out there that basically we're giving you these rules because we're trying to keep you from doing what you're actually free to do on your own without.
I'm not
I mean.
I do hear you say
I mean, yeah, but I mean, whether or not that's how you say it, I mean, I think, you know, yes, in some ways, I'm not sure if, I don't know if anybody said we're gonna create a law just because we don't want you, one person, to be able to do something. I'm not sure if that's, you know, that may be one of the, that may be kind of the result of it. Or maybe, I mean, I guess in some ways it could be. But I think why do we put classroom rules in place? It's because there's a purpose or something else you're trying to do, and if you don't have some of these certain things, people are interacting with one another, so you have to put some rules into it so that we're having some way for us all to interact in a way that's going to be able to benefit, so we don't lose the purpose of what we're actually doing. I mean, but do we talk about why? I think it is. I think it's okay to even have this. I mean, especially as they get older, just have the conversation. Do we even need them? Do you have to have rules? And have a conversation with kids around that. Let them make that and that sort of a determination. That it's hard to do with kindergartners, but I'm not sure how often they actually ask.
Well, I think might be a more interesting conversation, not necessarily with kindergartners, but a conversation is, rules and laws actually help our child they prevent things from happening.
Right.
I mean, we're not talking about fight clubs that.
Well, I think going back to the why, since we're just kind of brainstorming here, the why, I think a lot of times it plays out is we need these. Why do we have rules? Because what happens if these are
Well, but I thought we were talking about, we're talking about that because of the principle of limited government. See, to me, when we talk about limited government, it means that people have their liberty to do what they choose. So that's what we're trying to take back to. If a child doesn't have the understanding that when they grow up, because when they're at home, they don't have the liberty to choose whatever they want, because they don't live in a republic. They live most live in a dictatorship.
Right.
It's not a democratic society. So they have to have, there has to be this understanding that they have liberty, but with that liberty comes a responsibility. And I don't think laws create responsibility, but the reason of limited government is because people are being free, have the liberty to do what they choose.
But you gotta tell them, you gotta obey your mom and dad. And your mom and dad will.
Well, the other thing is, so I think
But it doesn't correlate with.
I think you gotta be careful with that too. I mean, because I will say there's been multiple times where I've dealt with kids who
We're obeying their mom and dad. Yeah, my mom said it, that other kid.
right, or my dad faking me in the car with him while he's high on heroin and wants me to drive around with him.
You know, but yet.
I'm just saying,
We're always subject to this.
So I'm just saying overall, I wouldn't put a blanket statement. That's why I wouldn't put a statement in that says we need to teach kids they have to obey their mom and dad.
Well, which is why when we're talking about government, I don't know if I still have to ask like, I think if we're going to teach, if we're teaching kids that yes, in school, they have rules they have to abide by, that's one thing. It doesn't have to be part of, it's not, in my mind, a part of government structure. It probably is not necessary to be in.
But I think that's why it's why. It may not be that we have to have rules, but there's an argument as to why do these rules exist. And there are rules that governments do have. Why were these things ever put in place? Because they were at some point in time. So whether we like certain things or don't like it, what was the rationale why people decided to do this? And as long as there have been civilizations, they started putting rules and structures and things in place to formulate these things. So why do people continue to do this?
I guess my point is though, we were talking about the principle of the scope of limited government.
Well, actually, I think it aligns with
Not
number
limited
B.
people.
If it goes to rule of law, it doesn't speak to limited government. That's what I just noticed myself. Is that it actually aligns with B, not A. And so the question is, should we have something in there that aligns with A?
Because B
Or
is,
should it
No, go back to that.
separate
B is
laws and
rule of law.
rules? And rules go down under relationships of the individual.
So you bring the government and then
your
rule of law.
relationship to your family or your
That's right,
relationship to your
there.
school or institution
It's
versus
the
a
scaffold
law
rule
that
of law.
has a specific relationship.
That's not the whole list. It's the scaffold, the rule of law, not the whole list.
yes, that is the scaffold of the rule of law. I agree
Yeah,
with
that's
that.
what that is.
Right.
So the question is, do we scaffold only one? Do we try to scaffold all of them? Do we just scaffold, or do we leave them out? Or, I mean, I think, and probably the reason they put that in there is because that's what happens in kindergarten. That's
Right.
the introduction.
That's the
kids to
easiest
school,
one to scaffold.
classroom,
But
that's
would it
easy.
be better that scaffolding happens under strand 6, the relationship
Under
of the individual
institutions.
and groups to institutions? And so it's
That's a good
relationships
point.
of me and my group, my family, or me to the institution of my school is about rules versus the government is about laws. And it just stops at whatever grade,
Right.
but the concept picks up under a new concept really of government.
Okay, so that's what they were doing, they were scaffolding at one concept, but not all of them.
Right.
Or principle, or not all of them.
So
And
what,
so we really do, I mean, I think fundamentally, we have to decide, are we going to do some subset or none at all? So, all of them, some subset, or none at all? In terms of the scaffold. Because right now, they just done one. And I think it's because it's the easiest one, it's one that's already done.
okay, so did we nix that one, Kathy?
First, it's off in
Did we
kindergarten,
nix
that the
that?
rules are
I'm
different
not sure.
Well, you're talking
at
about.
school than they are at home.
Right.
You learn why. It's a
I
different set of rules
what
at
you're
school
trying to
than
say
it
is
is at
there are
home.
different things, and I agree with
Some
you.
kids at home,
Right.
Laws really are about.
Yell and scream.
Do we want to-
Whatever they want.
Yeah.
They come to school, why can't we do that?
Yeah, but do we want to teach that as part of the common curriculum of government, of principles
So,
of government? So
if you look under,
that's the
And
challenge.
leave some of the red ones, methods of resolving.
Or is that better just taught as, something set, disconnected?
Because we left G green under relationship, it's the effects of laws and events on relationships. Effects of personal-
so was that one that we were trying to determine if we needed to come back to?
I don't know, I think it's kind of somewhere between the resolving and conflict. Groups I mean, to me, like, one of those old ones described how needs are met by families and friends, which is read. Part of the need is to keep safe, and so for our family, the rule was, cross the street without a grown-up holding your hand, until you're a certain age. That was a rule, so I wonder if it could be,
Where was that one?
it's under E and C, under strand 6, under relationships.
C and C.
Yeah, see, it's all read because we combined it, we
Right.
combined those concepts, but I wonder if we had a new that was about, I don't know, what would it be? Decision making in families or groups? It's more meeting the needs of individuals and groups.
it seems like we keep getting hung up on the difference between the two.
And I definitely agree there is a difference.
Yeah.
Right, that difference is there. So do we include that in here? Or do we?
I think it would be easier for us to get through the top if we just brought it down to laws and then put this somewhere. But I like the idea of the why do we have rules? Why do we, about.
So you're saying to identify why the rules are made in the relationships and where we're at, principles. And purpose is just a law.
So what would we say is the purpose of a rule? Maybe, said part of the key saying. Talk over other people, sitting, we're sitting together in a circle because.
Establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide the common defense of the most general welfare.
So, in kindergarten, we memorize the preamble. And then we make rules based off of the preamble.
If that's the process of the Constitution, is what the purpose of it, why they wanted it, thought it needed to be created, I don't think it's not total different than when they come up with an agreement for ways to have rules. If we are looking to work together on something, we want to make sure that we have a perfect union, in which we're going to treat each other in a just manner, so we can ensure some sort of tranquility that we can look out for each other and promote our general welfare. I don't think it's a whole lot different. And it's secret blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity.
School house right.
Right.
I really think we can those songs.
All right.
It's also possible to not talk about, maybe we can look at the family, but I'm not sure you have to talk about the family. I think that is part of where it comes down to the difference between even school and even laws, where I have a harder time with laws. I guess laws that impact some sort of issue, they're not being criminal. School becomes different because you're now interacting with people who are outside of your general family. So you have these different sets of things because you're also going into a setting that's outside of what you've been a part of before. It's out into. So most of the rules, that's where you do have some of you. Do we have rules that dictate what you can and can't do within your family? Sure. At least we kind of do. You can't put your kid in a cage and not beat them for a year. Work very well anyway, but so there's certain things. I think that part of why we look at some of the rules from different at school is because you do start to come outside of the family, and there's a different set of rules that then dictate in a classroom where you're interacting with 20 other children.
So what if we added this phrase? So outside of family relationships, identify why laws and rules are made. Or we put in classrooms and in school and the community. Something like that. So we're not we're specifically not saying, let's correlate this with the family. Let's look at
talking about social studies. This is how we interact with one another, and I do think that somewhere along the lines of most societies, we've decided to put rules and structures in place for how we do that. There's a reason why around district people have this need to do this, so it's part of social studies.
Identify and why you're still fit together. Identify like a name or a state or.
right. You're just coming up with a list of reasons.
Do we?
Which is basically what kindergarten would do, is make a list of reasons they would be able to go much more in depth.
What would be the goal in having laws in kindergarten?
So you're
I mean, what would we?
PBI says safe, responsible, I'm not saying three words.
Respectful.
Respectful.
identify the role of rules and law.
Identify reasons we have rules within our school community or our school.
So say that one again, let's look at it. 55 reasons for making rules in a school. Is that what you're saying? And this then is a forerunner to the rule of law.
Yeah, because then you see, in the original one, later they have like a grade 2 majority rule. So they like tried to pick up some of those principles earlier on.
Right.
To introduce them to the student.
Grade 1, that's a good one.
Well, what about,
What's up? No, I was just gonna say, what there are some that are missing when the government's missing.
my thing on here is indicating how laws and rules are being changed to promote the common good. How is that a principle of the Constitution? Like to me, if you're going to say that it somehow promotes the common good, you have to have the contrast at some point of how are laws and rules put out there that limit the individual rights of people. Because you're talking about, we're talking, that's a fundamental thing. The common good is not what, I mean, our founders didn't.
It says promote the general welfare.
What's the general welfare? That's like, I mean,
What's the difference in that common good?
well, let's look up what the meaning was at the time of our founding, because I don't think general welfare and common good of today mean that the what's good for most everybody. If that's the truth, if that's what they were creating, what makes that any different than a collectivist society or a communist society or a socialist society where the common good is above the individual's rights?
I think the actual structures will make it different. I don't think anybody looks at any sort of government structures and says we're going to do this to hurt everyone. They may think that no matter whether we agree with it or not, they probably think what they're doing is in the best interest of themselves and other people. But the actual structures themselves are what actually make it different. That's the limited government rule of law, majority right, separation of powers, checks and balances. That's what separates it. And that actually comes out of the government. So I think they're saying the structure that we are creating is being created in order to ensure all of the other things that we listen to create. That's in the best interest. This is the best structure because it is in the best interest of the people, and therefore who's going to solely create representative government where people can vote, they can do all these other things because it also has the people's voice. And it seems like all of these other things are the government structures in order to do what the hope was that would provide for domestic tranquility, common defense, general welfare, all the things that they literally said.
So what do you think their idea of moving the common good? What is the common good?
I don't think I would say that's not for them to decide. That's why they didn't make up all the rules. That's why they didn't put themselves in power to make all the decisions.
So why did our founders dissolve themselves from England and decide to create a republic? What was their main objective? What was their main thought?
That they probably wanted a different form of government.
You don't think it was liberty?
I would say that's not part of it. But I also think that what they did was that they didn't just say, we know everything, so we're going to then make what we're going to therefore make all of the decisions for everything. They created a system. So regardless of what they wanted at the time, that may have helped form what they did, but they were also, my thought is, and I have a really hard time speaking for anybody, but to say, well, all I can do is look at what we've got, which is a structure. And they said we're creating a structure in order to do this. So I have the words that are there, but I think that's the whole purpose, was to create a structure that ensured that. I don't think they're going, I think they went purposely out of the way to say we are not going to say what should be good for everybody else. We want to find some sort of a structure which allows people to speak for themselves.
Inside of the glossary, it says common good refers to programs or actions that are of benefit to society as a whole, laws to set up parks, public schools, public libraries, or pass to promote the common good. This is what that is.
I'm trying to understand how an individual's rights their declaration says we have these inalienable rights equals common good. I mean, that's basically saying, for most, this is what we're going to do. That, to me, I'm trying to understand how that way of thinking is different than any socialist society that's ever been created. How is the common good above the individual an American principle? That if that is true, then what is the difference between the American principles and a socialist society? If the common good is above the individual.
I think if we look at the Constitution, we see that there are certain individual protections set aside which guarantee the individual rights. And that was the whole preference and that preference started. But the purpose for having the Constitution as well was because we realized that as individual colonies, we could not sustain ourselves. So that there had to be, it goes back to the same discussion we had yesterday, why have government at all?
talking about the creation of the federal
Right.
church, the states would not have been able to stand their own against other countries, so they did form that union. But
And so
That-
Virginia wouldn't have the prevalence over New Hampshire or some others. The idea was to promote, we're going to have some laws that promote and rules that promote that. But I mean, if you go back even to kindergarten and say, what's the reason for having laws? For making rules. What is the reason?
I mean,
For what purpose?
yes.
It's for the purpose of everyone else.
But it doesn't prevent them, but my point to the laws thing is it actually doesn't prevent people from doing those things. That's not what prevents people from doing those things. Otherwise, nobody would be doing it.
Even though it is to promote it.
The general welfare, interesting thinking.
No, I mean, I think going back, there's no way, and even as a parent, nothing I'm going to say or do is actually going to prevent my kid from doing what they want to do. I can then punish them, I can tell them you can't do this, I can go through all that. My 2-year-old daughter, I told her she was to hold my hand in the park, and one of the first things she would do is pull her hand away, and I can grab her hand again. She still had a choice to pull her hand away, even though I told her I could hold on to it. That's not something we're going to change. That doesn't mean we shouldn't have rules at home. We should do those things even at home or at school, wherever it is. We may still have these rules. So yeah, it doesn't take away, but it's the idea that you are working to help to try to promote this larger purpose, whether it's rules or whatever it is. But I would say the same thing again, because you can't change it. And I think that's all the way down to I think in man's surgery when Victor Frankl says, look, I may not, you can never take away my power to interpret how I want or to think or to have my power or choice on how I see these things and view these things. Like you get in concentration camp, you can strip me of everything in the world, but you cannot, there's certain things that you'll never be able to touch. It's all in there. So I don't think anybody's saying you can take them away, but for some reason people continue to put rules in place. So why do we do this? Why do we create a structure for these things? Why do they do this? Do I think it's different than a socialist country? Yes, but that's partly through the structures of it. I think in any government, somebody along the lines thought they were doing it with either their own interest or somebody's best interest. Why did they do it? Because they didn't like a monarchy. And so they thought, we don't really like these monarchies, we don't like there's no structure, there's no voice for the people within this monarchy, so we create a different structure. It's trying to incorporate the voice of the people into how we are determining how these things are going to run. Or why do we put a structure on it? To help promote what could be the best for the most amount of people. I still think that's what we're trying to figure out. We don't think there is a perfect that works for everybody all the time in every situation. But they're trying to figure out what is the best way to help promote the general welfare and do all these different things.
Is the point of that is we're trying to get how laws are made or why laws are made?
For the common
Of
good.
how
I agree.
laws are made and changed
How is
to,
different. I think how is much more concrete in our country. How greater law is, that's.
maybe you could word it to how laws are made to ensure personal freedoms. And then we just get to some laws.
And I guess,
We're changing to the wording that was in there, not, the common good is kind of a red flag nowadays, I would say, that wording, but, what did you say, Patrick? What it said for the,
I just took it out of the agreement.
yeah,
General welfare.
general welfare.
Common defense that says this, that in order for a more perfect union establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessing of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish its constitution.
Just change that.
But isn't that explaining why the states created a federal government, the Constitution, not necessarily how the laws and rules are made?
Right, that should be
So
that.
it's-
But within the rest of it is how you would create law in our federal government. And that's what's laid out, how is a law created, is then laid out through the first part, which is the preamble, which to me is the why are we doing this, that started with the why, and then they're going to the but how do you actually do these things is then laid out.
Right, but then that's fine to have, I mean, yes, this defines the structure of how the law is created, but you can't separate the Constitution from the Bill of Rights, which basically says in the Ninth Amendment that there's, no law or no right that has been, how is it exactly read? It's the enumeration of the Constitution, certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people, which means me, we have those rights. So individual rights, that's where I'm like, to me, an individual's rights is at the top, not promoting the common good of society.
But I don't know if that's being questioned.
So do we need to have a statement in there about liberty, or about freedom, or about individual rights? So do we have both? Because I think that's important. Even if you go back to the beginning of time, people have always had individual rights, but even God told Adam and Eve, here's what you can do and here's what you can't do. Then when he chose his own group of people, he said, here's 10 things you can't do, or you can do. You're going to honor. And then fast forward a few centuries, and then Jesus says, well, you're going to love your neighbor as yourself, and you're going to honor. I mean, so that, I think the pattern is there, that we always have limits to our individual liberties. So God set up families and they set up governments. So I think that pattern is there. It's just we don't want to not honor the fact that we have liberties. So how do we get that concept in there? Because both they have to walk side by side. There's no way to look at one without looking at the other. So do we include both of those in here? So we do make laws and rules that affect the common good. You can't murder one another. Doesn't mean you're not going to murder one another. But we're saying you can't do that or you're going to be punished. That's the common good. So I can walk down the street in fear of being murdered. That's for my common good. But I have liberty to walk down the street. I have liberty to break the law. But we see punishment with it. And I think that's from the beginning of time. And what makes it different is the way we set up all of these pieces and how they work together. Now, just like the Pharisees went nuts and created this whole list of rules of what do's and don'ts, that wasn't. Sometimes we now have spiraled out of control in some areas, and we've got all kinds of rules and stuff that I think we've done the same thing.
Is there something to be said about maybe how individuals make the choice to create laws and rules? Any laws, rules, things that there are individuals who are making them. I think that, I don't know if that's where it comes in, but I think the idea, whether we can argue whether it is that way or not, the idea is still, could be wrong, but the idea is that when we make a law as a federal government, it's representative of the people that voted for the people that then made that law. And so in some ways, I think that was
the general premise.
Right, that's the general idea, was that we can't, unless we're going to, that we aren't, there's no direct, we're not voting direct, we're asking every single person to make a vote every time they're having it, but they're created some form of a representative government, and it's with the House of Representatives, and that therefore, that when they're making a law, the law is still giving you some individual, maybe limited, but individual choice into how these things are happening, because if you don't like the people, the law those people made in theory, then you can put them out.
Oh, protects us from law rules. I mean, you're not, just the, but yeah, I don't know that we can say laws
Like I said, in practice it may not be perfect, but was that the general overall idea behind it, was that you were trying to figure out some way to incorporate the power of people, the individual voice, into some of these things in a way that can still function. And I think you could in some ways even argue now, and we've talked about that maybe we've made some changes to try to incorporate more individuals' voices than what was initially. And it may not say that they're so far from perfect, but there's actually a purpose behind it. So is there a way to put individual, because like you're saying, you've always got the freedom to not follow the law. I mean, we even celebrate people, right? We celebrate people who chose not to follow certain laws. So we celebrate Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and we celebrate people who actually made the choice to not follow laws in some ways.
So could you just add on there, change that common good and individual?
I think if you go back to what Congress said is that, and we talked about yesterday, the social contract, is I'm going to be willing to give up a little bit of my freedom for certain protections or certain other things that should come out of that.
See, here's the difference though. That's your choice.
Right.
So that's what our founders came here to protect was my right to choose and your right to choose.
Right.
It doesn't mean that because you want to choose that, then now everybody has to. That is no longer individual, the protection of an individual's rights.
Right.
So if a law is created that doesn't protect individuals' rights, then it is not, I mean,
But the law-
whether it's a law now or not, doesn't make it a constitutional law, doesn't make it one that adheres to what our founding documents say. I mean, just because it's a law doesn't mean it's constitutional. So you're saying, because you used the healthcare issue yesterday, Bill, so you said you would give up some of your freedom to choose on healthcare for the sake of others. Well, that's your choice if you want to, but that's not, I mean, that sounds much more socialistic in its idea because you're promoting the common good over the individual. And that's your choice if you want to do that. But for a law to be written and force me to do that as well is not what our foundation, what our documents allow.
So in that framework, unless 100% of people all agree with any one law, then they should be able to do whatever we want to do.
No, the purpose of the rule of law is so that the laws align themselves with their constitutions, with the Constitution. It's not what the it's not.
But nowhere in the
not-
Constitution does it say any one law. There's not a law in there. It tells you how you can create a law, but it doesn't actually give a law. So if I had
But you can't separate the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, which lists that all the rights belong to the people. Anything that's not been enumerated,
so
that for the federal government, the boundaries that the federal government has put in are then reserved to the states.
but with that logic,
So, or the people.
all right, so with that logic, how do you ever create any laws? If you did, or how is that?
It's supposed to be pretty hard. I think it's supposed to be a lot harder than this.
So by that logic, the only law that could be created, according to what you're just saying, is that unless 100% of everybody agrees, then if you don't agree with the law that was just created, then you're saying that one individual should still be able to do what they even want to do as long as because they don't agree with the law that was created. They should still have that individual freedom to do whatever they want to do, and so even if this law is created, I'm going to therefore disagree with it because I didn't have a say in that.
That's called the tyranny of the individual.
That's what
It's
I'm
not,
understanding.
if it
So how would
is
you-
a law that goes against what our rights are, then yeah, I would. Because our founders believed that our rights came from our Creator. They were natural. They are not granted by a government. So
Okay.
a government cannot take them away from you.
Okay, unless, I mean, if there's.
There's nothing new under the sun. We're not dealing today with anything that hasn't been dealt with in history. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun. Everything repeats itself. History always repeats itself.
So I'm still not following how that actually goes into any sort of practice. Like, how does that actually have anything, how do we then create any sort of laws that don't violate somebody?
And I think the point was the point wasn't to have such an easy road, as I was saying, of creating laws. Because anytime you
create a law that removes a freedom from somebody else,
We also.
it quote, gives a person a freedom that, well, our founders believed they were already born with having.
But you also started
Then you're
by-
taking it from somebody else and telling them they can't do something.
Right, but we also
So we come
started.
under the premise of our rights have been somehow granted by something other than other than nature, other than our being born. I think that's the premise where you and I differ, is that I don't need to ask the government if I have the right to do something.
I'm not saying anybody needs to. I don't think anybody needs to. I think that at times there's something, I think everything is all that, sounds great, but at some point in time, I don't know how, if we all agree, which I would agree, that when you create a law or a rule, what you're doing, you're giving up some of your individual freedom. I think if a law is created and you agree with that law, then what you're agreeing with is that you're going to give that up. Now, if you don't agree with it, you can have a choice whether you're going to follow it or not follow it, and something or whatever may come with it, not follow it. But I'm not sure how that will, if you go into the government,
Or you go to the court system and you have them declare that it doesn't follow our system.
I think that's the structure they put in place, because you can't say we're going to create a structure for creating laws and then say, well, what we really don't want is any laws. That doesn't make any sense to say we're going to create a structure for making laws, but then also at the same point in time say, yeah, but our intention is to not have laws because laws limit freedom. Then why create a structure to create it? If you don't want laws, why create a structure in the first place?
I think one of the things that they did see the need for a limited need for those things, but we're not talking about just because one group of people decides they want this and other people don't. We're not creating laws for those purposes. There is a need for a general law. Yes, I think, does the law prevent a person from murdering another person? No. But to say that it's okay to murder is not okay either. So we have, I would say we have these moral laws that our founders, if nobody else, agreed with, that yeah, you can't murder anybody, and if you do, there's going to be consequences for it. But to say that, that's the same as me choosing not to have health care and then being penalized for it, that's not a moral law. That's people
Right, but,
deciding to create laws.
But I would also say that then you're speaking on behalf of everybody in terms of what people's moral things are. And that's why we would have a law, because that someone else could morally disagree that part of promoting everything we're saying to promote is that we're taking care of the people within your government. That part of them is to promote the common welfare and read all these things, and some of that may mean that you're doing that. And I'm not taking a stance one way or the other, because of whatever, that's the reason why you have a government that allows people to vote on those things. And that's the purpose of what they're trying to say, is that you can't get into, no matter what, your law, you're going to limit somebody's freedom. Even if you look at murder. If I want to be able to murder somebody and you create a law that's saying, get me in trouble if I do that, you try to limit my freedom by doing that.
That's why we have that's why, that would be absolutely pure freedom. To
Right.
do whatever you want.
Right.
What limits you from doing that, I don't think it's the law.
Oh, not
It's your moral.
And that's what we were really just kind of talking about.
That's what liberty is. Liberty is freedom plus morality.
Right. So, but there's still a reason why we create structures to come up with laws. And I think that's where you have to come up with something that, how do you create something that most people agree on? And so we may have different things, and so but if we're going to have somebody all fit under one large umbrella, which would be what they look to create with the Constitution for everybody in the government, there has to be some sort of a structure for creating laws, so they create the structures for how laws are created.
So what did if the federal government can't be limited in what they are allowed to create laws, what did our founders believe was the proper role of the federal government?
I think they limited them with the Bill of Rights. And I also would say that if you look at the founders, there wasn't any one thing that any one person said. That's why there were all the compromises when they created the Constitution. That they were on different sides, and so there was no one opinion that ruled any one thing. So I would say there's a system of compromise that went into effect in order to create this.
That's why there's also been a historical tension on this subject in terms of what is the proper role of government. And that's why we have so many multiple court cases, why some of the laws have remained, some have been challenged and thrown out. So it's part of the living, breathing process of the government is dealing out that tension between what is for the common good and what is for the individual. Some of it is pretty clear, and some of it is murky and has to be challenged over time.
So, what if we leave it like that top part? And leave out confidence also.
First grade laws. I mean, I can see, you know, like in the last month of school, there was a new rule about soccer on the playground because the kids were playing soccer and someone's leg got broke because they were shin guards. So no more soccer, you know, on the playground. So to me, I can see real clearly how there would be a first grade conversation about those kinds of things, an example of a law and that process of why it's made and changed. I think, what would that sound like for first grade? You know?
I go probably safety rules, safety laws. So we have in neighborhoods, people can't drive 65, they're limited to 25 or 35. And when they're on their bicycles, they have to wear helmets because their community may have set up a helmet law or.
So should we specify for safety? Because should we specifically relate it to that concept in this case, at this grade level?
See, that whole situation to me, that's unfortunate. Nobody gets to play soccer anymore because one person gets hurt. I don't like that. We have this for the last several years of my kids in school. Everyone's punished for one thing. Now, this wasn't injury, I understand chocolate programs, that's bad, but you've got the one kid that talks, everybody loses recess. It is this common corporate, everyone is punished or everyone loses their ability to do something because something happened to one. And that I don't. I understand you're using as an example, but I would almost teach it the other way. Now, no one gets to do anything because of one incident. And that is frustration. I mean, to me, it is extremely frustrating. And I wouldn't call that safety. You just gave up everyone's right.
Should we outlaw soccer or should we have 30 pair of shin guards?
It's like the rule is made if you don't play without a shin guard.
Right. And so
Instead of no more.
either you bring your own or we will have a
Then you're going to
box.
buy everybody one. But
Right. We have a box where the kids can get if they're going to play today.
yeah, that's where I'm. But you can have a good discussion there and see how it affects.
And our Congress did very clear. They said you can't have both security and liberty. They don't go together.
Right. They're
Yes,
full.
you can't have protection and security
But I
and
think it
remain
makes some good
with
discussion.
liberty.
All right, there's a good book out right now on polarity. It just came out in the last year or so. But it's talking about how everything we choose, there's just opposite poles all the time.
Maybe we should be the original of the curriculum or those kinds of discussions, which we shy away from.
Right. But it's polarity thinking. I mean, what we're stuck in the last 2 days is just polarity thinking. So we have to find that spot in the middle that we can agree to. Because it's difficult. Those are difficult pieces.
Well, the only thing I say to that is, are we looking to what we think, or are we to be looking, because if we're talking about our foundation and the founding of our country, shouldn't we be going to what they said and what they thought and what they were doing? Because, we're under this, we've lived under this. We haven't lived, although there's nothing, there is nothing new under the sun. We haven't lived under what they did for hundreds of years. I don't think that, I think they said
said you can't have both security and liberty. And, you know, they're saying, give me liberty or give me death. I mean, I don't think that's just an arbitrary thing that somebody, you know, throws out there on a given date. They were willing to die, many of them did, to preserve liberty for themselves and their posterity. And I don't know that we have a real understanding of what that actually means, because we haven't had to do much of that. And so my concern is, we're talking about the polarity of us, but should we be basing what we're teaching our kids on what our founders said and did, not what we think?
They did both. I mean, the Constitution itself is both the general welfare, but at the same time, the rights of both. It's a tension that exists within the document and within the government. Without that, things like society.
That's not all bad.
No, it's not.
Because sometimes it's just like gridlock to me, it's you know, it's just different ideas that we're butting into each other, not passing just.
Make sure we don't go too far.
Well, and it should.
The tyranny of the individual or the tyranny of the government.
But I think that's the federalist, anti-federalist, they agree to disagree. And so curriculum-wise, in the frame that we have, how do you deal with that with children? Why do people agree to disagree? You know, it's an essential question.
Right. Well, actually, they came up with a decision. That was majority. Right, and they did. You're exactly right. They came up with a decision rule.
I do think that common good is a principle that we are labeling onto the Constitution, that there are words that are used in the Constitution, that, you know, what's our discussion right now? What are we deciding on right now? Which one are we on?
We're right here on first grade. So if we were to think about this for kindergarten, because we're going to teach that already. And that's and it's a part of the principle of the Constitution is there is a rule of law. So then we identify reasons for why we need rules in our school setting. We don't have to, so we took it out of the family, we took it out and we just looked at the school setting. Then we explained to you how laws and rules are changed and made. Well, that takes that one step further. So if we don't like this rule,
So it needs to be identified how laws and rules in your community and how they protect or restrict individual rights. I mean, that's the bottom line of the discussion.
right, it is. It's the polarity. That's the polarity right there.
Yeah.
The tension.
And so is that a first grade conversation that we want to have? Because that's what we're debating for this first grade. Is that a conversation that we want first grade teachers and classrooms to facilitate?
I think it's just the fear that we don't want it to become implied in the way that kids are trained from a young age and keep a certain way, I guess is where I'm at. And I realize you're not going to go into the depth that we all have.
But what would you do? What would you do if your first grader came home and I had this discussion as a teacher? What would what would you want that conversation to sound like?
Like a summer discussion.
No, any discussion. So that's
We have a lot of discussion that I completely opposite of what they were told us.
I did in my kindergarten, in first grade, we have a lesson on fair and not fair, and one of the scenarios is it fair to sit everyone out for recess when you don't know who did something? And it's a discussion, and there's not a conclusive, this is the right way to handle it, or this is the wrong, but do you think that's fair or unfair? What are your thoughts? You know, I think I've shared that story before with the first grade classroom. They were all over there, and I said, well, I'm just going to share with you what I think, and I went to the not fair. You know, I don't think that is fair.
Right, I agree.
Do I understand in some circumstances why it happens? Yes. Do I think it's fair? Absolutely not. It isn't fair. You know, my kids are good kids. They're always sitting on the wall for something else. You know?
Well,
And I'll say, you're right. It's not fair.
I agree. And outside, I
So, is there a way to have polarity in here?
I don't think so.
At first,
I mean, I think
it would
you
be
can have
hard.
discussions about fair and not fair, but isn't that part of the rotation, isn't that part of government, what you have got to decision? I don't know.
Well, you go down to disputes. Here's the government. This is about disputes. And here's another common good here. We haven't got to that part yet.
I mean, for me, it's why I always, during the kindergarten orientation meeting, I would always say to parents, I'm going to tell you that somebody's hair is going to get cut off. Because this is my 5th year of teaching, and I know it's going to happen. And I wish I could tell you and guarantee, that I'm going to do everything I can to prevent it, but I know it's going to happen. I've found hair in desks, I've found it under chairs, and I don't know who cut it. I don't know who cut it. But if you have suggestions, let me have them. But here's the bottom line, it's gonna happen. Am I gonna sit the whole class out for recess because someone's hair got cut? But I think there's also that perspective of my kid's hair got cut, or my kid got tripped on the playground, and I want something to happen. So how do you have those discussions? But that's what I do. I said it's gonna happen, and I am so sorry. And I remember, one year I called and I'm explaining, I want to say, that conversation I had at orientation about hair cutting and blah, 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 blah. And when I finally, when I got to Jordan's hair got cut, her mom said, oh my gosh, thank goodness, I thought she was the color. But I think, how do we put things in here to support a teacher in not making it polarized, but in not shying away from having good, rich conversations with kids.
Well, in 7th and 8th grade, when we set up our classroom rules, we specifically talked about, now, if we make this set of rules, then here are the kind of restrictions you're going to have. If we don't have this kind of rule, then think of all the other things you can do. So how can we work together to respect one another and not have all these systems? That way we can enjoy all the freedoms of the class. I mean, we had that discussion every year with every class. And so the kids and I would limit the amount of rules we made because I want them to have as much individual freedom and get along and promote the general welfare of all of us learning and hearing. So it's just, but that's with junior high. I wouldn't have that at 1st grade.
Well, and you're still training to go along with the home of respect for the word. I mean, the teacher says these are the rules, and you're to obey to try to get yourself.
A lot of schools do. They may not go into full depth, but they will incorporate student voice and create rules in the classroom.
And we try to have teachers do that.
So a lot of times it's, they didn't massage and direct it, but they do incorporate students into a lot of times that creation of rules.
Well, so if you look at, this is under governance, but look how this 1st grade part is, examine how individual rights are protected. So we talk about common good up above, and we talk about individual rights here. And I think they've tried to include.
And then it says in grade 2, explain the word good. Practice that here.
Maybe you just simply put while protecting individual rights.
Because at 1st grade, they understand the individual rights. Protected.
You're right to throw me a chance where my nose begins.
But who was it that
I
said
don't
that?
know. Used to.
Yeah, you're right in where my nose begins. Like did we say that? Do what? I mean, I learned it years and years ago in high
I
school.
think that's a nice addition. I like that.
We'll put it green just because we'll go back and talk about it. Okay.
And I think it is an interesting idea about changing out the term common code and replacing it with general law, the language of the Constitution.
It was what?
It was really related to taxes. I mean, the state, if you go back and read the commentary of the founders, it's really related to taxes.
The general welfare. They wanted to, under the articles, they couldn't tax people, so that's why they had that in the Constitution.
Tax people so they can buy goods and services
Or-
that benefit everyone.
Like for schools.
Well, more so than that's
It's for what?
is for what?
Right.
Yeah, it's for the benefit because the multi-states would pay for it. I don't know why.
Quote is attributed to all of our local laws.
Okay.
Doesn't say what it is, that's what.
Okay. So do we include that, Alden, would you say we include that language or we just leave it as it is? Especially if that language is actually talking about war, paying for war. Because really, I would say it was more to ensure domestic tranquility. How we get along with one another is why we make a lot of laws. It's about disputes and
It's all legal action.
clarification. Do what?
It would probably be a latter interpretation.
What's really interesting though is many of those laws that you're talking about in that respect actually help us do that.
Get along better.
Do those laws actually help us do that, or do they just stop the conversation and prevent one person from doing something that another person doesn't want to do?
Yeah, we could argue either way. Live about, find out what happens.
Do what?
Live about, find out what happens.
Right.
Solitary or litigation short.
Okay, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put that in red. Does anybody, let's go around. Do we need to add to this phrase or can we leave this as it is? Does that help us understand the rule of law as we're building it across?
Which phrase?
Explain and give examples of how laws and rules are made and changed.
How is it different from second grade? How would those be different?
This one? This was cities.
So where would you have a law that's not in a city or a government, a formal government? Where would you have? Do you know what I mean?
It's procedural.
Right.
We talk, it's the procedural. In the city, you have certain procedures that are different from national procedures.
So which ones are you referring to in first grade? That's my question. So when you say how laws,
General
what are you
laws.
referring to?
I'd say you could use whatever. I mean, first grade, we're looking at community, I guess. So that would be more.
So how's that different from kindergarten that says school and community?
Well, kindergarten, we've just left it with school for now.
Oh, okay, okay, I
Right.
forgot that for a second. Hold up.
whichever rules.
Okay, so I have that question when I look at it, having sat through 3 hours of discussion. It's gonna be a question that teachers have, I'm just,
Right.
you just have school in K and then you have cities
Within,
with ordinances in 2.
within cities. And it's really, cities are very wide.
So,
Yeah, it should be community, right?
Right, community, within the community.
it's like the okay jump is higher than first and then second. And I explain an example of how they have changed. To me, that's a much deeper how and why they changed versus why they have them. It's a deeper conversation than the second grade one, yes.
Well, we haven't done second grade yet.
Okay, all right.
So maybe we expedite that. Or does this one, sorry. Does it look more like that?
I feel better about K1.
Does that scaffold the
Yeah.
understanding more? If that's the case, let's get rid of this. So then you've given you've looked at just B, rule of law, and you've scaffolded that all the way back to kindergarten. And at third grade, you introduced the idea of majority rule. We've probably already talked about that in K1 too. Let's give it a name. In third grade. Patrick, what do you think about those 4 in a row?
I like that switch. Just because I do think it, and the other way I would have wanted to take the word laws out. Again, at least just because I don't think we've gotten into the laws. I think laws are different. When I say laws are different than rules, I think, but sort of long cut back, it's really short. Just say, I think that switch, so I'm good.
What do you think? Give it a thumbs up?
We talked to you yesterday, we went to the Grand Cafe.
Yeah,
I really wanted a Diet Coke, but I didn't want it to go in a little tea.
What do you think? You know, you have to go.
Yes, I'm sorry. What do I think about?
Of these 4 in a row. 4 non-yellow. You're scaffolding the rule of law over.
Right, I guess my idea of the rule of law isn't that, it's a totally different mindset, totally different thinking. To me, the rule of law is, the rule of law means whatever law is being created has to adhere to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, not that, most people are, think that it's this or that, or people voted on it, this and that. To me, the rule of law means it For me, those don't do that. So I wouldn't have to disagree, but that doesn't mean you don't, do your thing and move on. So I mean,
Okay.
you got the other responsibilities at home you gotta get to.
What do you
Sorry,
think,
I'll
Alan?
be here tomorrow.
So what's going on with grade 3? We've changed quite a bit.
Grade 3 we would change.
It will explain and apply the concept of majority rule.
That was already there.
I know. Hi, Tanya. Safe travels. So that's very different
Yeah, you'll let me
from the
know.
others. One of those things is not like this.
Is there, towards the end of August,
I don't think that's.
are there,
Will you put the, will you send this to me again?
I'll send it there.
Okay.
Yes. Toward the end of August, what are you, is there certain times that you just ask us to keep?
Right.
Let me see if I have.
So K1 and 2 makes sense together.
To me,
You
it's
guys
just
are
girls,
school.
it's girls right now.
When's your first day of school?
13.
That's ours too.
Our first day of school is 18.
The 18th.
We're talking during the week like we've done.
Yes.
Not that last week of August that we're thinking that. I don't have anything.
Yeah, I was thinking that last week of August, to give all of us a chance to get school started. And as parents, to give us a chance of the routine of school again.
Yeah. With our kids.
Yeah.
So K1.
Enjoy your vacation.
Thank you.
Thank you
much.
See you guys.
Bye. So K1 and 2 all fit nicely together. I'm not sure about 3, where that goes in relation to the other 2.
You said 3, you mean the yellow part or the majority rule part?
The majority rule part, it's very different. To me, that's different. We're doing something different there than we are on K1 and 2.
What if we took that second grade, instead of having it within the community, we just, because what if you made that within the state or whatever, change that, would that not fit with
Right.
the Constitution and the other
Yeah.
parts that are yellow?
Yeah.
And if we're talking about how rules are changed or made, do you think majority rule will probably come up
Yeah.
within how it's actually made?
So you just take number 2 and reword it for state. And dump it in the circles.
You take here,
Yeah, cut that, put it into 3 and change it from the community to state. And that gives the teacher an opportunity to do the, our classroom, our city, community, state.
really it's laws at that point,
Right.
unless you look at the EPA, and then those are rules.
Well, and isn't it just laws in the community? Ordinances are like laws.
Right.
So should we take it out?
Community can be generic enough to include school,
Classroom.
I guess that's true.
Yeah, could be your suburb. Your suburb, whatever they're called.
Yeah, like the subdivision.
Subdivisions, cover holders, whatever, homeowners, rules.
And I really struggle with this.
I hate those
So
things.
why do we have May, explain, why do we have May? So we already have May, first grade.
Go out and build a
May
shed in your backyard.
Or you
So then we would make laws
go.
since second grade. So the
Yeah, we're
difference
gonna
is how
build a
we
shed
change.
in the backyard.
Right.
We
And
have
we look
acreage,
at-
but we're actually in this.
Yeah.
Examples, okay.
To certain things, like our farms and stuff like that, was, we agree with that, but actual Webster County spot, we do not have, very good.
The homeowner society has, my in-laws live in Lake Chesterfield, where like Lake, like one day all of a sudden
Drains.
like there was this great big one, but all of a sudden you go out there and all the water was gone.
Yeah.
And like literally it was some sort of underground, like
There's a cave system
underneath it, and it just all of a sudden rained, like literally in 2 days, all the water was gone.
But they all have lakefront property.
Right, and so, right, so that, so then it became this issue of what are they gonna do with it? And so they had this homeowner association vote where every person was gonna pay $1,000, they were gonna bring in something, it was West Seinfeld. Go to Seinfeld.
Yeah.
Alright, so in Seinfeld, Kramer had his idea for prevent oil leaks, is to put a bladder system on the inside of oil tankers. So that whether it hits it, there will be like some sort of, and that's kind of what they talked about, how they were gonna plug this hole, that they were essentially gonna just kind of put some stuff that was gonna cost $1,000 per homeowner, and they had this vote, and everybody you talked to said they voted no.
But it passed.
So it passed.
Yeah.
That's fine.
And they said it's only a temporary solution. It don't happen.
Yeah,
That's what happened. Now the water's full. I don't know how they got it. What happened? Now it's full. Right now it's full. So it's just everything.
Put that bladder in there and then fill it all in.
Well, I keep saying they've got all these kids that live in this neighborhood. Like there's tons of kids. There's no like playground. They should just fill it in and turn it into a park. Put it into a big park where you
But it's called, what's the name of this?
Oh, Lake Chesterfield. But like, there's a road that goes across on one side the lake's still there, but on this other side, it keeps draining.
Yep.
Here, we call it Chesterfield, there's something for those.
Yeah.
Chesterfield Parks.
All right, we have a break.